Yeah, we're off. Hi, guys.
A little bit more because it was this ongoing sort of project. So when I started doing research,
Right. Welcome everybody to Tough Talks. This is a subcategory of the Tough Love podcast. My guest tonight is best-selling author, biblical historian, and all-around awesome guy, Gary Wayne. He is the author of the book The Genesis 6 Conspiracy, which is a
Hey, Dan. I'm
fantastic read.
good to see
It
you
is
guys.
quite a bit of a mind bender if you're wanting to go down the rabbit hole and see exactly what the good book has in store for you, should you decide you want to peel back the layers on what exactly took place in Genesis 6. You can find his book in paperback on Amazon for $26.71 or on Kindle for $9.99. Again, Gary is a fabulous wealth of knowledge, and I think the book I started off reading the Kindle version.
Hey, Cactus. Good to see
I'm
you.
not quite sure what exactly Kindle pages equate to in real pages.
they never line up.
No, I think I'm like on page 620 in Kindle pages, and I'm not exactly sure what lands on my physical pages. But if you're interested in seeing what the book is all about, Gary has a very generous excerpt of this book on his website, genesis6conspiracy.com. You owe it to yourself to, even if you're not going to read the whole thing, read a few chapters. There is so much in here. This is, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the culmination of 30 years worth of research.
Yeah, it was, and you might even say more, but not a whole bunch more, but a little bit more, because it was this ongoing sort of project. So when I started doing research, I wasn't intending on necessarily writing a book. I just wanted to find things out for myself, and particularly on prophecy. That's
I got you, boss. Love you, bro.
Somebody scared the socks off of me with a challenge, and they said, if you got the courage, we have a book for you to read. And I said, okay, well, I'm like 20 or 21. I'm going, oh yeah, I'm not afraid of nothing. And
for sure.
And I had no idea what book they might be suggesting, but it was The Late Great Planet Earth by Hal Lindsey.
I'm reading that right now. Oh.
Yeah. And considering when he wrote it in the late 60s, and I read it like in 1980 or 81, I mean, it scared the socks off me. So I wanted to verify whether or not he was being accurate. And was he manipulating things? Did he leave out things? And when I started to check it out, the passages seemed to be legitimately quoted, and things seemed to line up, and I thought he was way ahead of his time, and still think he was way ahead of his time. But that started me to say, well, that's not enough for me, though. I need to verify this myself completely. And so it put me on the path back to God, and I started to write down all of the passages in prophecy. And like you writing your research on the wars, you just don't realize how many different narratives there are on those types of things in the Bible until you start to say, hey, I'm going to, use highlighters or whatever, or files. So I had to start and do it again several times because my approach was inadequate to properly log it. And, along the way in Genesis 6, I mean, you run across these crazy things called giants. And I didn't want anything to do with that. I'm going, whatever that is, that's not what I'm here to do. I'm going to work on what I wanted to find out.
Sure.
Trouble is, it kept coming up, right? So by about 1995 or so, 1996, I thought, I've got everything logged, and I actually gone back and logged in things about the fallen angels and logged in things like the demons and the giants, because they just seem to be connected to a prophecy trail. And you've got demons and fallen angels and end time prophecy, and they seem to be related to it's angelic rebellion.
Diane, they deserve that. Them ones that Burning Man ceremony, they deserve to be trapped. They're trapped like rats in the mud.
Sons of God are created by the fallen angels. There's just this sort of connection that I thought I should log all of that. So I decided I would write a short book. That was the plan. Because I've got like 15
short
or
book.
20 books I'd like to write, and based on my research. And so I thought, but I don't have a platform. I'm not a minister. I don't have a theology degree. I'm just your average Joe who said, here's what I've learned, and can I sort of communicate that properly? So no platform, no nothing. And so I wrote the first 10 chapters fairly quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, when I was growing up, and before I come back to this research, where prophecy became my absolute, passion, as well as giants, I had this passion of history and mythology when I was young, and I read a lot, and I just was fascinated by the whole thing, and thinking, okay, well, it's just kind of like interesting fantasy because it's like movies, right? And it's like, but was it all really real? And you're told we don't know what's real and what's not real and all that sort of stuff. But I saw all of these commonalities, particularly in Greek mythology and Sumerian mythology, and around the world they tell the same story about the flood, and they tell the story about the giants and the survival and things like that, or how they show up after the flood. So I thought I need to mix some of that in. And then when I did that, I realized I'm not giving Christians proper context, right? Okay. Because I'm just saying it's the same, but I don't give them proper context. Yeah, I'm lining it up with what the Bible says, but so then I had to learn about their religions. So I had to read about all the different Gnostic religions, the different kinds of religions like Hinduism, the different types of scriptures that they have in India, whether it's the Upanishads or it's the Vedas.
Sure.
And then I had to read about
the
Shemaiah, the Popol Vuh, and I read the Mormon book, and I read everything I could get my hands on to get a better understanding of what their culture was, because their culture in polytheism was polytheism, right? And so you have to provide the context. And then I learned that when they started to develop their cult of knowledge, Gnosticism, as we understand it in the West, that led me into the development of these really weird, strange things called mystery schools, odd name, part of the mystical religion, for only the elite, that they taught them in degrees of education, just as they did in the mystical religion, except that was focused in a specific agenda or smaller area for development. And then I understood, coming out of that, they had subsets within the mystery schools that we would know as secret societies, just as you have all of these different initiatory groups on university today, because it's the same thing. 7 sacred science.
What's there to say, guys? He's having sex with a chicken, with a guy right across from him. How can you come to that?
7 liberal science is the same thing. And so then that led me down the rabbit hole. I have to learn about secret societies because I don't know anything about them.
Sure.
So then I went down that, and I was down there for a long time, and it's just so massive.
And well, your book is this thick.
Well, I'm like 300 pages out too.
Oh my gosh! Yeah. Okay.
But you can write forever on it, right? So.
Well, now that I'm thinking 600 pages Kindle-wise, I'm probably only about that far in now.
Yeah. So I don't know what chapter you're on, but there's 98 chapters. So in the written text of the hard copy, it's over 800 pages, but there's 120 pages of endnotes in there. Wow. So one of the things I wanted to do, and then I'm doubling down on the sequel that'll be out later this year. Just trying to see where we're at in terms of the publishing process right now. It's a go. It's just a matter of who and where is going to be doing it, because we're reconsidering the publisher is reconsidering using another publisher that's got larger resources, more distribution, more marketing, stuff like that. So we're working through that sort of process. So, but I have a bibliography in there that people just say, it's worth the money to have that bibliography. But what I really wanted to do was to make sure I did the footnotes so that everybody could verify if they wanted what I was saying. Because what I talk about is so crazy,
it's so vast.
Not been interested to it, and so vast that I thought I'd better do this in a way that they can verify it. And if they don't like the sources, then they'll call me out on it. not, they won't, because
For sure.
you just can't just say, well, it doesn't, you know, he's just making it up, except, well, he's got 120 pages of footnotes.
Yeah. Well, and looking when I started reading Hal Lindsey's book, Late Great Planet Earth,
Yep.
a little over 3 weeks ago.
Yep.
And I'm almost done with that one. But I noticed that you guys both have a very similar footnote style, and I really appreciate that in books because, like you said, it does give people the chance to actually vet what you're saying and not just take it at face value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
that thing is well worth having, like you said, just for the footnotes alone.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is, in my approach, is that I don't have all the answers, but here's what I've learned.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can take it.
Last year at the Burning Man, didn't a man run into the bonfire? He actually ran full pelt in the run into the bonfire. If he'd done that, I reckon he was MK Ultra programmed to do it.
Take it further.
Sure, and that's a perfect segue.
And that's the platform for them. So,
well, Gary, we are very, very honored and blessed to have you on the stream tonight. Like I said, that's a perfect segue into the topic of conversation tonight, which is going to be on it's kind of a two-parter topic. It's addressing the grandiose violence that we see all throughout the Old Testament in the Bible by way of establishing who exactly these Canaanite tribes were and the tribes that Israel was up against during the conquest of Canaan and then their flight from Egypt. Because a lot of people, and when I was just really getting into biblical research, a lot of the questions that were posed to me was, how do you explain all the seemingly wanton violence inside the Bible, where God says to Joshua, I want you to wipe out of these tribes every man, woman, and child. I want you to kill all the cattle, save only the bronze, silver, and copper vessels and gold vessels, everything else devoted to destruction. Because it seems on its face like, wow, that's a little much. That's, maybe dial it down like 20% here. But that'll be it. My goal is for tonight's talk to provide people with the context that they need to be able to explain that violence by knowing exactly who these tribes were and what they were to Israel.
Yeah. So
without further ado, as I mentioned in some of my own research shortly before the show, I'll save a long story. I'll shorten it here, but I was posed a number of questions by a cousin of mine, and they all had to do with the Bible. One was on the topic of slavery. Was I aware the Bible condoned slavery? Was I aware that the Bible condoned genocide and supported genocide? It was a litany of very, very emotionally based questions, which I didn't have answers for at the time. So I said, you know what? I'd love to answer these now, but I'm just not read enough to be able to handle this. Give me some time and I'll find the answers for you. And one of the questions in answering the question of, well, how do you explain the violence specifically towards the Amalekites led me down the path of studying the Nephilim and the Rephaim. And my wife was actually the first one who stumbled upon your website. And she said, babe, you need to hop on here and check this guy out because this is a rabbit hole I was not prepared for. And so I said, okay, well, let me sit down. And I started pouring through that very, very generous excerpt you have inside there. And it was like, I get through one chapter and I'm like, oh, I need to go call my parents or read some scripture or something here. This is more than I was ready for. But I kept reading. And it helped me explain to my cousin, okay, well, this is the reason for the violence here. But it led me on a deeper dive into, okay, well, instead of just addressing this one instance of violence inside the Bible, specifically towards the Amalekites, what about all these other instances with tribes that have 6 syllables in there that I can't quite pronounce properly without the proper or chutzpah that I need? So I put out a search online for just giant tribes that existed in the Bible. Yeah. And almost every website I found lists the same 36 tribes. And so I decided
there's 36 tribes. I never knew that.
Just looking at the Bible as a basis, try and find all that I could on them. And I think I've got it narrowed down to about 29 tribes. So I wanted to run these by you in like 2s and 3s and see where you land.
There's a lot, but there's not 36 tribes.
Yeah, I didn't think there was 36.
In the Bible.
Yeah.
And then you get into the nuances of what's a hybrid giant human and what's a purebred giant tribe.
Sure. And
Different classifications of that.
one of the things that I really enjoyed that both you and Chuck Missler touched on was while all the original Nephilim were all giants, as bloodlines get diluted through generations, it's not necessarily a given that they're all going to be monstrous size, but they are half.
Yeah, and we can, and we'll end up, hopefully, since things you brought it up, I'll end up talking about at some point in time why they interbred with humans and why those bloodlines became diluted.
Sure. All right. Well, let's kick it off here. I've got them listed alphabetically.
Okay. So we can go off one at a time. I'll say yes or no or give an explanation.
Perfect. This should be a pretty easy layup here. The Amalekites.
Yes and no.
Okay.
So the Amalekites that most people are familiar with are created in Genesis 36 through Timnah, who is a Horim and a Horim tribe. And she's the offspring of Seir, of the dukes, the Alephs of Edom.
Okay.
Right? And her brother is Lotan. So she is a giant, a female giant. A lot of people ask me about, well, why is there never any females listed? Well, sometimes you just don't know the name.
Sure.
Right? There's a couple other ones. But anyways, she marries Eliphaz, son of Esau.
Okay.
Right? And Esau is the one that the Amalekites, that the Israelites, Jacob in particular, before his name's changed to Israel, he's the twin brother of Esau, and he steals the blessing and the birthright and the Messianic blessing as well, because in two different times he seizes that. So there's this rivalry that's going to develop down through the ages. So the Edomites, they move into the land of Edom, Idumea, and Esau and his descendants will intermarry with the giants. So I won't go through the names that Esau married to create hybrid giants, because he's obviously not a giant. He's from the Abrahamic bloodline, but they named Timnah and Eliphaz, create a new nation called Amalekites, and this is a hybrid nation.
Okay.
And they take that name sort of eponymously or patronymically, you could probably say both on that, from a tribe of giants named the Amalekim, and they're going to go live amongst them and create the Agag, the Agag dynasty.
Wow.
Now we know that this is a different group than the Amalekim, as I would like to call them. I will call giant tribes with an I am, which is the male plural, which means ones. And so they all have a meaning to the name, and it's sort of assigned with ones. So, like, for example, Nephilim are the giant ones. The Rephaim, the Seraphim, are the serpent-faced ones, the angels.
Sure.
It's plural, and so you understand it sort of that way. Amalekim, or Amalekites, as they're badly translated out of Hebrew, first show up in Genesis 14, not Genesis 36. There's the people there. Now, what's really interesting about Genesis 14 is that's the war of the Mesopotamian giants against the regional area of the land of the covenant giants. And they are a giant nation that's listed there before. And the Amalekim were listed not only in southern Edom, but also in the east. And so there seems to have been
good pickup. Bad weather people go missing, Vas. That's probably a good point.
First to the Mesopotamia area, and then not too long after, either another branch, along with some other giant nations, went down to live in the Edom area region, or Mount Seir, which is named after Seir, the patriarch for Timnah, and Seir goes back to the Hebrew word satir, which is a goat god.
Wow, gosh, it's also connected. So now in Genesis 14,
so those are two tribes there. One hybrid.
So Genesis 14, was that when is it I forget, I'm probably gonna butcher the name, Chedorlaomer? Isn't he the one who came out on top in that one?
Yeah. Well, he's the one he's actually more of a vassal of the III dynasty. He's the tax collector.
Okay.
And that's why you get two sort of different orders of the listings of those Mesopotamian kings. And so one is for the story as to who the Canaanites and the sodomite Pentapolis had decided to stop paying the vassal tribute.
Gotcha.
So, right,
Probably
that's what
became
it's
a
talking
colony.
about in the narrative there, right? So, yeah, so he's part of the the Third Dynasty, and all of the kings, and there's one of the kings in there that's from the the Third Dynasty. So, he is one of the kings, but he's not the leader. This is the era of the empire of the Third Dynasty.
Wow. Wow, wow. So essentially waging war, is waging war by proxy through him, essentially.
Yeah.
Outstanding. Okay.
Yeah, and what's interesting is as you get into that war, they don't attack the Sodomites first, and they're Pentapolis of cities. Pentapolis is in 5 city-states, which is a very important concept to understand the military structure of the giants and the hybrid giants. What they do first is they go and they attack the Rephaim of Mount Hermon, and other tribes. I don't want to jump ahead on the tribes, and then they go down in the south and they take care of all of those other Rephaim giant nations, because they're the ones who are protecting the hybrids, and in particular Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities of the plains. So they are going to take out the worst of the the military threat before they go in and recapture Sodom and Gomorrah and make them a vassal state again.
Fascinating. Gosh, you pull one tiny thread and this whole thing just
it goes in 1,000 different directions.
Oh my gosh. No wonder it took you 30 years to get all the research together.
Yeah.
All right. Well, moving right along. Next up, I've got the Amorites.
Yeah. Amorites are hybrids.
Okay.
Amorites are a patriarchless nation that is listed in the Table of Nations, which is in Genesis 10 and First Chronicles. And they're part of 9 of the tribes of Canaan, but they're listed as families. And so, whereas Heth would be for the Hittites be a patriarch, and Sidon a patriarch for the Sidonians, and Canaan for the Canaanites, you don't get a patriarch. And the usual assumption there is that they descended from the 3 patriarchs, but the Bible doesn't say that. So who they are the hybrids from the Anakim, which is another tribe of giants. And Arba was the patriarch for the Anakim. And we learn that in the book of Joshua. He's listed twice. And his city, capital royal city, was Kiriath Arba.
Yes, yeah, okay. I actually just read through that chapter a week or 2 weeks ago.
I like any knowledge,
Arba
Di.
was the greatest of the Anakim. And Kiriath Arba is the antiquity name for Hebron, which is just south of Jerusalem, and in the area where Abraham first moved to. Because he was associating with these even before. It just, as you start to understand, for the audience, once you start to understand who these peoples are, it just opens up the doors of context and understanding of what was really going on back there. Now, Amorites are depicted on reliefs as blonde-haired and blue-eyed and pale-skinned. The Anakim were also blonde-haired, blue-eyed, and pale-skinned. And so the name Amorite would come from a giant named Amar or Emor. And what's the closest name to that, and as you take it back from a patronymic kingship title that's being passed on, which is also key to understand what's going on in the Old Testament, you have Hamor of Shechem, of another group of giants, who Israel is actually going to have a situation with Dinah, and they want Dinah to marry her.
Yes,
violated, and they slay them all.
The Hittites, yes.
No, Hivim.
Not the Hittites. Oh, Hivims, sorry.
Hivim, as opposed to the Hivites, because there's both.
Okay.
These are the Hivim. And Hamor would be, from a Hebrew perspective, very, very close to Amor or Amar. And it seems that name probably comes from a god of the Baalim, Amaru.
Okay, wow.
And so a giant would have had a similar name, probably very close to the Hebrew word for Amorite, which they would have taken that name patronymically and eponymously.
Wow, boy, like you were saying, it's like you touch on one, and then they're somehow linked to 2 or 3 others here. Because I think we've already been able to touch on 4 tribes at least, if I've got my notes correct.
So in my new book, I go through all of this and take these guys back, the patriarchs.
Bless you, bless you, Gary.
It's very complex.
Yeah,
but you start to see this picture being formed. So let me knock off one more off your list. We talked about the Horim and the Horites, right? So Horim are red-haired, hazel-eyed, and pale-skinned giants. Okay, different branch of the giants, but very much connected to the Anakim, and living in the same sort of region, but different cities and different pentapolis city-states.
Okay.
If they all had 5. The royal city would have 4 more city-state satellites, and then have all of these walled villages and things like that as part of the military complex. So just to sort of knock them off, in Horites, you will see them listed, or Horites and Horim listed in the Old Testament both ways.
I've seen
Deuteronomy 2, they're listed as Horim. And then you got Horites, and they don't do a very good job of trying to distinguish which are they. What I would deduce is that the Horim are intermarrying with some Edomites, but through Horim patriarchs, like Hori, listed in Genesis 36, creates that form of hybrid giant as opposed to the purebred, and opposed to the Edomites that would have Esau posterity patriarchs that were interbreeding with females from the Horim.
Wow!
To make some sense.
Yeah, well, and with the different
that's why you have the Dukes of Edom listing both the Dukes of Esau's descendants and the Dukes of Seir's descendants.
So deep. Wow. Well, and like you mentioned, different names being used in multiple different ways. Like it's kind of similar with the Zamzummim or Zamzummim, or Sidonians versus Zidonians.
Yeah.
Outstanding. Real quick, we have a super chat here from Thomas Furman. Would just like to support you. Remember, everyone, it's funny to laugh at Ark of the Covenant induced hemorrhoids, golden or otherwise.
Yeah.
Have a good chat, guys.
Yeah.
for
I write about that. I write about that in detail in the new book as well.
Can't wait.
Nobody ever takes that on.
No.
For anybody who understand the context and the Philistine military complex of that time as well.
Yeah, for anybody who's not well aware, just read about the time in the Bible when the Philistines decided to steal the Ark of the Covenant. Have yourself a good laugh.
See ya.
Yes. Thank you very much for that.
One would imagine those would be giant hemorrhoids too.
Oh gosh. Yeah, who's the poor guy who had to pose for those? Like, can you hold still there? We're working on the forge here. Oh gosh. Well, okay, so I've got, let's see, 4.
But it also has another meaning, but we won't go into that. I'm off topic.
Maybe we'll circle back around.
I've been waiting for you. You're the messenger.
From the Walking Dead universe. He's alive. 3 brand new series.
We made one badass scene.
Only on Stan. The Walking Dead Dead City.
All right, so I've got a few taken care of. This one also.
Sorry, guys. I used to watch The Walking Dead. I was just watching that ad.
Be another easy layup here. The Anakim.
Yeah, the Anakim, as I said, are giants. And whether or not they're listed as Anakites, the only thing that I see connected in the passages, I don't see a hybrid nation of Anakites other than like the Amorites.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay.
Now, they may have also listed, had some of their giants maybe who have started some other tribes that I couldn't trace back to Anakim, even though I say this is going to be the patronymic name. I'm not able to say is that one of all of these other specific tribe of all of these nomenclature names of giants, but definitely the Amorites would be one of their hybrids, and the Amorites lived amongst them, but the Amorites lived in other areas as well, so it gets a little bit complicated that way as well. But the Anakim, they are giants, whether it's Anak, Anakim, Anakite, and their name means long neck. So they had long necks, like a serpentine neck, probably
Interesting.
wide and probably flared out, as what you would have seen with the cobra image with the pharaohs.
I was just gonna ask that. Just gonna ask that. Yep.
Because they wouldn't be long, gangly necks, because these beasts were strong. So you get words like strong and stout and words like that. Their height to width ratio is thought to be 2 to 1 versus 3 to 1 of the human. So if you have, for example, Goliath, who's 6 cubits in a span, he was the king of Gath. So I'm putting him at 11 feet, maybe up to 3 inches on a 21-inch.
Sure, the royal cubit.
The royal cubit versus he would have been 9'9" on a standard cubit. But Josephus said measure him by the royal cubit because that's how giants were measured, right? So, and so he would have been 5 feet wide, 6 feet wide.
Goodness.
Yeah. Now look at Og's bed.
Yes.
It was 9 cubits and 4 cubits wide. He is the king of Ashtaroth, the king of Edrei, king of 60 pentapolis or 5 pentapolis city-states. He was a powerhouse that was unbelievable. His bed is 9 cubits, which would be, you know, up to 16 feet tall. Close to 16 feet tall is a royal cubit, and 7 feet wide. So he would be somewhere, depending on the cubit size, 12 to 15 feet tall and 4 to 6 feet wide.
Wow.
And wouldn't have been as tall as Gilgamesh, which isn't in the book, but just as one more comparative, both in the Ugaritic texts and in the Epic of Gilgamesh and in the Epic of Itzubar, which is talking the same stories, just different names. He is 11 cubits and 4 cubits wide, and king of Uruk. So he measured on the 21 inches. He's over 19 feet tall and 7 feet wide.
Whoa. Oh, it's a big old boy right there. My gosh.
So, I mean, we're not talking about being a foot taller. Now, the hybrids, as the Egyptians called them, they're the Shazu. Other names you might hear are Amal and Shamal. And that becomes through the Hyksos relationship that we probably won't get into tonight. But they're thought to be 6 to 9 feet tall, as they're listed in sources like the Egyptian execration texts and things like that. So hybrids.
Wow.
Half human, half giant, but not as tall as Goliath and not as tall as Og would have been.
Sure. I can imagine you might have an anomaly in there every once in a while.
Yeah.
One comes to mind, the one that one of David's mighty men slays when it's recanting his like 5 main guys who really went to town.
Yeah, and then Og's bed was kept on display as a museum for many, many years in the city of Rabbah.
Wow.
And it was left there, as we're told, because the writers of the Bible and wanted people to remember what Israel was up against. And when the word giant that they refer to as these different tribes, and they wanted them to understand the size of these giants.
Sure.
So that was sort of a living image. And Josephus even said up to his time, they were still on display, these giant bones in museums that had no real kinship to human bones in terms of the size and some of the differences, but they're a hybrid angelic being who took a physical form and passed that DNA on.
My goodness. Now, I know in one of the translations, I think it's the NIV translation, because I was looking up specifically about Og and his bed. Some of the pushback from that, people, they cite various kings throughout Asia and India often having very gargantuan beds just as sort of a status symbol. And they were saying, oh, he probably wasn't actually that tall because, you know, the whole status thing.
Yeah, then what they do is they conflate the ritual.
Vast, I've heard the numbers, like there's 1 million hybrids underground in the DUMB bases that are going to go to war and come on the surface and go to war against us. Yeah, apparently there's 1 million of them.
Beds where they would have sex, which would have been, they would have been way bigger and are way bigger in places where they found them, like in Mesopotamia with the bed that he slept in.
Sure.
This is the bed he slept in.
Okay.
Not the one they had the rituals done in. The
Sure.
orgies and stuff like that in the temples, right? Again, what people do when they're using misinformation, they only provide part of that information. Some of it might be true, but they selectively edit what they're communicating. And
Sure.
again, that's one of the things I try and do is never present half the case.
Yeah, and I appreciate that too. And like inside your book, there's a number of little segues that you end up going on because it's like you establish a point, but then you have to provide all the foundation for that point. And I'm one who likes to argue both sides of the fence too. So I'm right there with you, Gary. And one last note on that bed. So in the one translation that I was looking at, they
good to see ya.
sarcophagus. Now I went straight to the NASB.
No, it doesn't translate to sarcophagus.
Yeah, I didn't figure that was correct. So I was like, everything else here says bed. I went to NASB and sure enough, it was bed there. And I'm like, well, it's the driest, but that's the one that's going to give me the closest word for word.
Yeah. Now, it doesn't mean he didn't have a sarcophagus because most kings did. And with the Rephaim, which he was, and his name also means long neck as well. So kinship with the Anakim. And with most of these Rephaim, and he's a giant. So that word giant goes back to the Hebrew word Rapha and the male plural I am. So the word giant only goes back to Nephilim 3 times in the Bible. Once in Genesis 6:4, and twice in Numbers 13:33. And so in Numbers 13:33, this is part of the evil embellished report to terrify the Israelites. And what they're saying is the Anakim are giants, and says that twice, or the children of giants, and that's the word Nephilim. That's not accurate. Doesn't mean they didn't see the giants, as in Talmai, Sheshai, and Ahiman, kings of Hebron, Kiriath Arba, as Anak, as Anakim, but there was also other nations that were hybrids in there that were like the Amalekites and the Amorites, who we talked about, and the Hivites, and a few other ones that they listed, but these were a separate breed. These were the giant kings, and the giants were the kings over the hybrid nations as well. So they set up their dynasties over those nations as well. Now, we know that the Anakim are not Nephilim because in Deuteronomy 2, where the Anakim and the Horim and the Abim and the Zamzuzim and the Emim are listed as giants, that's the Hebrew word Rapha.
Okay.
So all the other times in the Old Testament, except for once in the book of Job, where it's translated in the King James Version as giant, that one goes back to Gibor or Gibborim, which is a description of the giants. So I don't disagree with the translation there as a giant, but it doesn't mean it's specifically talking about a true Nephilim, right?
Sure. Sort of a semantic issue there.
Yeah, just as Cush is a mighty one and a Gibborim. A Gibborim can describe a giant, can describe a powerful warrior, doesn't have to be. It can describe a man, it can call him noble, it can mean the strength of God, it can the strength, the excellence of angels. It's used 155 times in the Old Testament, but not always for a giant. So you have to understand the application, right? In terms of Gibor. The other 25 times where giant shows up in the Old Testament, it's either going to show up as Rephaim or giant, where it goes back to the word Rapha. So Rephaim shows up as a tribe twice, literally translated as Rephaim, even in the KJV version, and that's in Genesis 14, the War of Giants, in Mount Hermon. And the second time Rephaim shows up is in Genesis 15, when God is laying out the land from the Euphrates to the Nile that he's going to gift to Abraham, and the Rephaim are listed amongst the mighty 7 and the mighty 10.
Wow. Oh, I'm gonna have to go back and watch the stream myself, because like I've totally just blown my notepad apart here. I can't hardly read what I've scratched here. Wow, my goodness.
So I'm not sure where we were here, but anyways, we got going on some details.
I don't mind the meandering. Like I said before, I really appreciate it because it provides a context that is so necessary here. And wow, we were up to 28 viewers. Thank you guys for stopping by. Another quick super chat here from Thomas Herman again. Can I ask Mr. Wayne, what is the other meaning of hemorrhoid? This will be the last off-color comment I make, but I'm too fascinated to not ask, coming from his knowledge base. Thank you both.
Yeah, so I mean, you've got these tumors, these hemorrhoids that are being created as a representation of mice as well. There's two types of cool things, and both of them are to represent the hemorrhoids are to represent the tumors, and also to represent, because there's 5 of them, the 5 kings of the Philistine.
Hey, Shawnee.
Cities.
Interesting. And these were what were put back inside the Ark of the Covenant after the Philistines were afflicted by plague because they stole the Ark of the Covenant, and they put the hemorrhoids and the mice in there as a gift to God's people to say, hey, please ease on up. We're tired of not being able to sit any longer.
Exactly. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you for that, Gary.
And the mice is the mice network of the Philistine military complex. So the mice represents not just the kings, but then all of the villages that mar the land. Wow. It's the whole thing that was, they're saying, our whole confederacy of giants and
apologizing
hybrids. Yeah. Don't destroy us and send this
Amen, boss.
leg away.
Oh my gosh. My gosh.
Because I doubt whether they had Vaseline or anything like that back then.
Oh, yeah. Oh my goodness. They're probably rendering fat to help out there.
Yeah, I know people have got some images in there they wish they didn't have.
Yeah, right. Well, welcome to the Bible study, y'all.
Yep.
So next up here, I've got 2 names. It's the Ashtothites and the Ashdodites.
Oh, those are a city of Ashdod.
Okay.
That's part of that's part of the Philistine network. So the Philistines are hybrids. They come from Cashulim, who will produce them. So there's something that's going on. So they're going to intermarry either in Egypt or more likely in Crete, because they migrate to Egypt and then they migrate to Crete after that. And there's also Philistines that I cover off as well in the time of Abraham. So even before that. So, and then they come back because obviously they have relatives that are still there, the Philistines, like Abimelech is one of the ones that Abraham, he's the king of the Philistines there at that time. But it's the ones who come back in about 1550 BC, about 100 years or so, maybe a little bit more before the Exodus. Okay. And they expropriate the land of Gaza, and they push out much of the Avim, as Deuteronomy 2 talks about.
Yeah.
They push out much of the Anakim and other giants. But understand that Avim are still going to have Gaza, and the Anakim, the Avim are going to have Gaza, the Anakim are still going to have Gath, and they're going to have Ashdod. So if those are giants, they're going to be either Avim or Anakim, but they lived in the city of Ashdod, so they'd be called by that as one of the acronyms, just as Goliath was a Gittite from Gath. Doesn't mean Gittite, it's the city of Anakim, part of that later becomes part of the Philistine Confederacy. And so the Philistines then migrate with the Cherithim and the Pelathim. And the Caphtharim, which are giants, Indo-Aryans that were living in Crete. And so you see Philistines depicted with dark hair and some with light hair. So you've got a mix of the ones that were originally in the Philistine, in the Gaza area, southern.
Yeah, Diane, I believe in the super space program. I believe in that. They're way ahead. If they could do the Philadelphia experiment in 1942 and make a ship go into another dimension, they're like nearly 100 years ahead of that. So I believe in the super space program.
And then the ones who have intermarried with the Indo-Aryans, the dark-haired ones, which would be akin to Gilgamesh, and
sure,
right, with the dark-haired ones, right, and migrate back at probably because of the Santorini eruptions, where this islands become unlivable, and they go back to where the Hyksos were part of, and to the Philistines who had settled there. The Hyksos, who leave again before the Exodus, they're the ones who put Israel into slavery. While because there's a pharaoh that comes up that Joseph didn't know, which makes no sense. But it's a foreign thing. That's the Hyksos who take over, and they're from. Well, I won't go through that whole spiel unless it comes up tonight. But anyways, it's the I lost my. Oh, anyways, they're the dark-haired giants that are part of that sort of northern range. It's the Greek area, Greek Empire, Achaia. You have the dark-haired ones that are in Mesopotamia with the Aryans and the Persians.
Now, is that where we get like
Syrian
a lot of the
kings
Anunnaki?
have dark hair and those dark beards, so it's part of that strain. So they're the ones that come back with those giant nations to the land of the covenant that are going to push out the Anakim and the Abim to a certain point, but then put them back into the Philistine Confederacy as part of the what I call larger Southern alliance of giants.
So then, with the ones in Assyria that you just mentioned, is that where we get sort of the stories about the Anunnaki and those?
From Mesopotamia, or
Mesopotamia.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So in Mesopotamia, you have Anunnaki of heaven and Anunnaki of the earth, because they created giants themselves. They're the demigod kings. So an Anunnaki angel or a god is depicted usually on reliefs as having a bird face and wings and these very stocky, wide, strong legs, and they're usually doing this ritual around this sort of technology, or what they would call in occultism some sort of tree of life or energy or something like that. You also see these Anunnaki that are depicted as a human face. So these are
long hair, the curls.
Yeah, just like you would see Gilgamesh being depicted or Nimrod, right? So because understand that when they reproduce in that physical body, whether it's a human face or a bird face, they're going to produce giants that look just like them, right? And so Gilgamesh would probably be from the cherubim watcher. Because the cherubim, when they take their form on the earth, they take one face of four at a time. But we get different depictions. So you get like the falcon gods, or
so Talia, you can astral travel. If you go and see the Akashic records, does that mean you can astral travel?
You have the Tengu.
Like Osiris there.
Yeah. Oh, well, Osiris is a serpent god.
Horus. Sorry, Horus. That's the one.
Right, and then you have the Tengu, which are these bird-faced creatures, the offsprings of the gods in Southeast Asia, China, India, Japan, and then you have the Zabalba in the Popol Vuh, and these were all demigod giants because they were seemingly created by these cherubim. So if it was a lion face, which we see on cherubs, cherubim, and other names, sphinxes, you have a bull and ox as the other face. We get all these different depictions on the sphinx-like creature, and then you also have these giants with similar types of faces as well. Just as you have lion-men of Moab, and the lion-like men of Gad that were wilderness men, Gibberim, as you take that back to Hebrew, and then you have this Arioch. That's one of the kings of the Mesopotamians, and Arioch, which is partially rooted etymologically with Aryan, because of the Aryans, Indo-Aryans, as they're known in polytheism, and the Aryans that the Achaemenids take their bloodlines back to, of the Persian kings of the Persian Peace dynasty. You have Arioch, which means lion-like.
My gosh, it just keeps unraveling further and further.
The more you dig, the more you find, and it just doesn't seem to stop.
Wow.
But the trick is can you put it together with some connection and not sound like a raving lunatic?
Well, that's what the second book is for, right?
Yeah. Well, just for the Christians, they've told me over and over and over and over and over, and I'm Christian, that they want to know more of what's in the Bible and go real deep. So I go real deep on the second book.
We have a question from Ian Roland. He says, so many religions find their gods in these giants?
Partially. The religions come from the fallen angels. And so they're known, as pantheons, right? And they have a similar pantheon all around the world. It's the same hierarchy. It's the same wandering stars of the seven that are the major ones. They just have different vernacular names. So I think there was sort of one common main pantheon, a lot of sub-pantheons around the world. So these are fallen angels. So Zeus is a fallen angel. His father Kronos is a fallen angel. So the best way I can bring that back to the Bible is the Canaanite pantheon. El is the parent god.
Yes.
Baal is the offspring god, as with Moth, and both created giants. El before the flood, Baal and Ashtaroth after the flood create the Rephaim. And in the Ugaritic text, they're doing fertility rituals to bring Baal and Ashtaroth back. They don't explain where they are, but they need to come back. I know where they are. They created giants after the flood, so they're in the abyss too, just like the parents went there. Because they're having fertility issues after the flood versus the ones before the flood had no fertility issues. So again, they're distinct, not only in name, not only in time, but in...
Lars, is very intriguing, the chronovisor, isn't it? So I was thinking, how did they know where to zero in on the chronovisor? But after what Talia was just saying about the Akashic records, I bet somehow they got technology that they can see the Akashic records. They can go to Christ's crucifixion and zero in on that. I bet that's how they're doing it.
In terms of some of the characteristics, which seem to be somewhat diminished in terms of their size and certainly their fertility issue and probably some other of the strengths.
Is that why you see so many Asherim poles then, sort of in homage to the fertility then?
Partially because they want to bring back more of the demigods. That's part of that whole, I mean, it's a religion of giants, right?
Yeah.
They're the demigod representatives as offspring, the giants are, to run the religions and to run the governance for the pantheon of gods. And so you have this term in the Bible that people probably haven't really recognized from the King James Version Bible. It's called the terrible ones.
Yes.
There's a branch of the terrible ones in Isaiah 25 that's going to be destroyed at the foot of a mountain in the end time. And terrible one, they're also located in Ezekiel 32. It's elsewhere too, but I'm giving the two best ones. They're called the branch of the terrible ones, the strong ones. And in Ezekiel 32, you have Pharaoh top.
Talia, I know a bit about the Akashic records because that's what Edgar Casey used to get access to. So I know all about them. I tried all my life to astral travel before I became Christian. I could never do it. I could read tarot cards, I could read crystal balls, I could do dowsing, but I just could not astral travel. And I reckon that was God not letting me astral travel because when you empty your body, something can come into it. But yeah, that's how come I know about the Akashic records.
To these terrible ones that are already in the sides of the abyss in the prison. The ones who are slain for being the terrible ones on earth. Terrible one, Harit, in its singular format, but because there's one as it's translated, it should be translated as Iratim.
Doggy, you
the
make
terrible
one
rock. Right? These are ones that are defined as strong, giants, powerful, all giant sort of terms of, it doesn't say giant, but strong, powerful, a whole bunch of words like that. But it's describing these bloodlines and these kings of these nations. And so they have, as part of their definition, the fertility issue. They're childless or infertile. And so generally, I think, referring to the females. So I think even though God knows that giants are going to show up after the flood because he leaves free choice even for the fallen angels and to do what they want.
Okay, Cactus, good night, mate.
In certain rules and regulations, he's going to ensure that they can't multiply in huge numbers like they did before the flood. They're going to have this difficulty. So they have to take in humans because of that. Otherwise, they're going to go extinct.
Wow. I just had a thought here, and I'm sure it'll come back to me at some point. when you were mentioning when you mentioned the angels that fell, I think it's an important thing to touch on just briefly here, because a lot of people they read about Jude and they read about the angels who sinned being held inside the abyss until the end of days, until the great and terrible day of the Lord. And a lot of people try and associate that with, okay, well they fell, they sinned, so that's the same angels, but it's incorrect. The sin that they're talking about in Jude is specifically talking about those angels who disrobed from their oikaterion to engage in sexual intercourse with humans to then create the Nephilim. So I think it's important that for people to know that though that third of angels fell, not all of them committed to this sexual sin for that first insurgence of the Nephilim.
And not all of them that were left.
And so
in the second incursion. So that means there's other fallen angels not in the abyss by extension.
Good, because the question was, people have asked, okay, so you had Nephilim before the flood. Well, how did they get here after the flood? Well, pretty simply put, more angels decided for the sake of their unrighteous cause, they were going to disrobe and commence the jiggling.
In polytheism, the offspring gods overthrow the parent gods, and they kill them. You can't kill something that's immortal. Maybe God can, but angels can't.
Yeah.
So what happens is that they have their own rebellious Saba, host of heaven, army, rank and order. So they just move up after the parents were taken away before the flood. So they're ruling after the flood. They walk amongst humans just as Baal does, just as Mot does, just as Anki does, offspring god of Anu, Lael, offspring god of Anu, just as Zeus, offspring god of Kronos, just as Osiris is an offspring god, Isis is an offspring, right? So, and these are the ones who procreate after the flood. And what's another interesting thing is that's why the Ugaritic texts are trying to bring them back to reproduce more Rephaim, who are ones who could actually heal themselves as part of the definition. Yeah, that's why you have to take them off at the head and suddenly, so they don't have time to repair. And so 7495 is Rapha for heal, as in Raphael, healer of God, right?
Wow.
Okay, but it's the root word and partial meaning to 7497, which is the giant, and partial meaning to and source word for 7496, which is evil spirit, shade, and disembodied spirit of a Rephaim, right? Because
now is that 7495 H or G?
H.
H. Okay.
Yeah. Hebrew. Yep.
I got some studying to do.
Now, in the Ugaritic text, what's really important about that is that this is a city that has all sorts of giants, right? It has the assembly of the Dat Tanu, the assembly of the Tuatha De Danann, the tribe of Anu. It's got many different alliterations. And what's also interesting is that you have the Rephaim and the Raphaim, which are the Rephaim. There's RPM in the original Semitic, which is the root word for Rephaim. These are post-Diluvian giants. And you have the city named Ugarit. And so that is split into Ug and Arit. Now, take Og back to Hebrew, and it's Og, translated O-W-G, rooted in a word that means round or stout, which is Ug, U-W-G, so U-G. Arit is terrible. It's the city of Og, of the terrible one.
My gosh, man. I need to study an etymology at some point in the future here, because wow. So I'm going to insert this here real quick too. So for those who are just tuning in, what we set out to do at the beginning of this topic is, number one, to address the brutal violence that we see inside the Old Testament. Because you see Israel coming up again and again and again against these tribes of nations during their conquest of Canaan, where they're told to wipe out every man, woman, and child. They're told to slaughter every clutch of livestock that these people had, burn everything to the ground, only save the gold, silver, and bronze vessels for service of the Lord. And so a lot of these tribes that we've already covered inside here were, in fact, these Nephilim or Rephaim, these gigantic human angel hybrids. Some of them, as Gary mentioned, were bona fide giants. Some of them were bona fide hybrids. What is understood, though, is that They were damned abominations by God himself. And as such, he demanded that they be eradicated from this plane of existence.
Well,
and
they also squatted God's land.
Yeah, that was, and another
defiled
thing.
it.
Yeah, and that's a big thing that people will touch on because they say, "Oh, well, Israel's coming into Canaan and taking their land." Not true, because if you look at the book of Job, when the sons of God are presenting themselves before the Lord, and he's saying, "Hey, where have you been? What you been up to?" You know, Satan's there among them. Those Canaanite tribes knew full well for those 400 years that land belonged to Israel, but yet they still decided to lay down this genetic minefield, just waiting for them.
The land of the Hamites was gifted to them as the land in Africa. The only tribe that didn't move there was the Canaanites. So they illegally squatted, and I think they were trying to lift the curse burden from the curse of Ham that happens right after the flood as being in servitude by aligning themselves with the giants. And they probably thought they may have been accursed anyway, so they might as well just sort of go ahead and do that. Now, where I make my understanding that we know God gifted the land, but where I take my understanding from is Deuteronomy 32, which leans on Psalms 82. So Psalms 82 is the council of the gods, right? This is the council that answers to Satan. That is a different council than the council that Satan reports to, even in the book of Job 1:6 and 2:1. This is the Nephilim world order, as opposed to Nephilim. Nephilim, which is the Nephal, is the root word for Nephilim, which means fall. I am, put the male plural on, what do you get?
The fallen ones.
Yeah. They're the Nephilim of the Shemaim. The Shemaim are the heavenly ones. So heaven comes from the plural Shemaim. Shema is the singular. It's never used in the Old Testament. It's always heavens, the old plural Shemaim. And so if we understand that, then we can now link what's being talked about as the prince of this world is the New Testament, that they're ruling this world for a time and they control the world, just as Satan was trying to offer Jesus all the kingdoms of the world because he had legal rights to that for a time, right? Okay, now roll that back to Deuteronomy 32, which is very, very important. And I cover this off a little bit in the first book and then really in detail in the second book and define Israel in a way because you have different translations of that. People need to understand that. I don't want to go down that definition right now because it'll take me 15 or 20 minutes to explain. But Deuteronomy 32 with the sons of Israel, that the number of the nations after the flood are numbered by the sons of Israel or the sons of Jacob born in Egypt. That's 70. That's the same number as the 70 patriarchs. Not all.
I don't know who that is, Shorty.
In the table of nations that inherit the lands, right? And you had and it's the same number as the 70 sons of Adam before the flood. So
and the same number of the 70 apostles that Jesus sends out to go minister.
Yeah. It's an amazing, it's perfect harmony in terms of how the Bible sort of works in that sort of manner. So the whole world was divvied up amongst the gods that rule from the ruling council and divvied up amongst through the ranks of those leaders of those fallen angels that rule this world. The land of the covenant was reserved for God for his purposes. So that both the giants and the Canaanites squatted God's land and defiled it and did every abomination they could in that land and then waited knowingly through their gods that they worship for the nation of hope to be born, return, and then wipe them from the face of the earth, just as the Amalekites swore to. And the book of Psalms outlines all of those nations. And it's the Amalekites that stirred up all the other nations and got them going, even after they were defeated, to wipe them from the face of the earth. And every war that you have with Israel from that point forward is in response, except for the taking of the land, when they give them notice to leave before they go in. Every war after the conquest that Israel is involved on is that those nations are trying to wipe Israel from the face of the earth.
Yeah. Okay. Now, correct me if I'm wrong here, but the main reason God says you are not to interbreed with them, you don't give them your sons and daughters in marriage, neither will you take theirs. I believe that that's specifically because he has to have a pure human bloodline in order for his son Jesus to be born. Can't be tainted with angel blood. And that seems to me that was a big issue that even the Moabites, the tribes descending from Lot, had run afoul of, because they were right there. They were right there in the mix of it.
And as a dwelling place for the spirit that comes from heaven. And it's defined as habitation, as you mentioned, Oikoteri and Jude 1:6, where the angels come from. And they need a new Oikoteri in the physical world if they're going to interact physically. So they create a soul and a body. That's from this world, spirits from heaven. And so what they do is that and you have this one other use of Oikoteri in Greek in the New Testament, and that's 2 Corinthians 5:2. That's house in heaven. So it's that dwelling place.
What we desire.
And temple of it's God's house. It's God's temple for God's spirit, not for a counterfeit spirit. So Israel, which is a nation of priests, either spiritually or physically, were held to a higher standard to keep both of those pure. And if you're going to create a lineage for the Messiah,
got to be a pure bloodline.
It's got to be a pure bloodline.
Very good. And for those who want to chase this rabbit hole down, I encourage you to read through the book of Joshua, the story of Rahab the harlot, and then jump straight to Matthew and go through the table of nations that lead up to Jesus's genealogy. And you'll find that for her kindness and for her saving the 2 spies that came in to scout out Jericho, she was included in Jesus's his genealogy. Very, very cool story there. Well, all right. So you covered a number of them there. So I can skip the Avim and the Avites. I can skip the Caphtorim. I can skip the.
So the Avites are the Avim as well, if you've got that on the list.
Yep, I've got
either with 1 V or 2 Vs.
I've got them both.
Yeah.
So let's see. We skipped Caphtorim. The Ekronites, I believe you touched on. Those are also Philistines, correct?
Ekronites, that's the city of Philistine.
Okay, cool. Yay!
Right? So part of that confederacy. So
I'm tracking with you. And you mentioned the Emim already. Now, were the Emim, were they hybrid or were they giants?
Emim were giants.
Okay.
So and they're listed as giants in Deuteronomy 2 as Raphaim. So they're part of the greater Raphaim. There's a Raphaim race, and then there's either vernacular names for different tribes or different creators from different gods. It's hard to know. I think there's a distinction. Otherwise, they just all would be called Raphaim, but they're called by a lot of different names. So, and the Emim were part of the War of Giants, Genesis 14.
Awesome.
I cover them off in the Bible. I cover all the giant nations off in the second book, and I do the Emim in the first book too. And I think they're defined as causing someone to have terror. They're part of the terrible ones.
Bunch of bad dudes over here.
Can you imagine these things that were that big? Now, can you imagine that most of the ones were made that we get accounts of had a snake face, from seraphim, serpent-faced angels as
nightmares.
Yes. And they already have this long neck. They already know they're twice as wide. They're monstrous. They would bellow with their voices. If you've ever seen that movie Stargate and the Goa'uld, and they have that bellowing voice, that's what they're emulating. And they also were called the Shining Ones because they had these large wraparound eyes that glowed and would light up the room, again, just as they're kind of depicted with those eyes in the Stargate series. And then they had these elongated giant skulls that were sutureless.
My God. My gosh.
No wonder it was so frightening. And if people want to get a look at a diluted bloodline, Google Akhenaten.
Guys, you remember on yesterday's stream I said I watched Stargate, and they got a race there called the Goa'uld, and they're based on the reptilians. I said that. I said that yesterday. I knew that.
Yeah, or go visit an Akhenaten or King Tut museum that travels around. He has this long, extended, protruding chin, thin serpentine-like lips, high cheekbones, large wraparound eyes, this elongated skull that he usually is covered with this huge hat to cover that abominably big head. And you look at him and you see a serpent's face. I swear it.
Easily. I've actually been to, there was an exhibit that came to the Berkeley Museum in Rockford, Illinois, which I went to, and they actually had a replica of the sarcophagus there.
Yep.
And they had a bust of, it would have been, of Nefertiti, and somebody said that this was made for her to practice her makeup on, which I don't know that I believe that.
Yeah.
Maybe she was just really trying to get that wispy cat eye, because they're not twins, they're sisters. But they talked about the headdress, which went about a foot off her head.
Yeah.
And I looked at that and I thought, this girl probably had this gigantic egg head, and that was the only way that you could actually cover that up properly.
There are depictions of her without a hat, and it's exactly as you described it. This big
Wow.
head. It's just, I mean, it's just, I mean, as a human, I find it disgusting. I'm sure they didn't, but
I don't know, maybe Dan Aykroyd
I'm
would get down on that.
I can't help myself. And then they also stunk. They had a sulfur smell to them too. So
You know, it's funny.
Wow.
You go down the rabbit hole looking into Sasquatch and the Sabe, and they talk about them having a very powerful odor as well.
Yeah.
Also having
All
some
part of it.
crazy,
Yep.
crazy lung capacity for roaring.
yeah.
Well, moving on here. So we covered let's see, we did the Emam, the Ashkelonites. Did I just mention them?
Ashkelon, yeah, that
Ashkelonites?
is Philistine city as well.
Awesome.
A lot of the ones that are listed as giants are redundant because they're named after cities. As
Okay.
people of that city, but
all the same people class then. Gotcha. So then that covers then the Gazites or Gazathites.
Yeah.
Also would be Philistine there.
Yeah.
Then we've
or
got
Aza. If you say Gaza and Aza, that's the same word in the Hebrew. It's just poorly translated.
gotcha. Okay.
If you wanted the other are consistent at least, but it's not.
Would that be like Azites or Azites?
Yeah, they'd be because it was a Philistine and or an Avim city. You would probably have classified them, and I do as Avim.
Avim. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. All right. So next up, we've got the Geshurites, and you already touched on Gibeonites.
Yeah.
But who are the Geshurites?
The Gibeonites I didn't touch on.
Oh, you didn't? Oh,
I did not.
wonderful, wonderful.
So let's call them the Gibeonim
Okay. Gibeonim.
because these were giants, and there would have been, and they also produced down the road, and maybe even at the time of the Exodus, they would have maybe had some hybrids as well. So classify them as both. The Gibeonim were a division of the Hivim, Hivvim.
Okay.
And a branch of the Horim, just as you have Hivim mentioned in Genesis 36 as well. And I think it's Lotan is both a Hivim and a Horim as he's listed there. It's how closely they're related. But the Hivim were more, in this part of the giants, more closely settled into the central region. And then you also had some Hivim that were part of Mount Hermon as well. So there's different areas of the Hivim. And then if people have heard the Hurrians, that's the Hurim, as you take that back to Hebrew, that's three different branches of a similar kind of giant. But the Hurim were more in the north and between, let's say, Mount Hermon and Mesopotamian into that region, and very much closely associated with the Syrians and the Hittites as well. So they're part of that region. So yeah, so chalk in Hurim, which you won't have on there. Nobody has ever listed the Hurim. That took a lot of effort. The easiest way is just Hurrim.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. It's actually going to have a CH spelling as you take that back to Hebrew, just as Horim is CHORIM, but the C is silent, so to speak. So that's three different groups. And so the Gibeonim were actually part of the Hivim, as the account in Joshua talks about as you go through that whole chapter. The reference as both.
Okay, that clears up a bit more of my list over here.
Yeah.
And then,
Peace treaty that they made.
yes, where they showed up looking like little vagabonds, and oh my gosh, we traveled so far.
And they
help us
become
out.
woodcutters, which is connected to the branch of them in Mount Hermon. As you take that definition back, they become also temple servants as part of that treaty.
Interesting.
That's it. I mean, they said, we're not going to destroy you, but we now know who you are.
Sure.
They show up downstream as temple servants called the Nephilim. So in the time of Ezra and the second temple and building, you get that word. That's who they are, the descendants of the Gibeonine or the Gibeonites, as they're listed in the Bible.
You know, it makes sense.
Translated in the Bible.
Well, it makes sense as to why they were made cedar cutters. Who better to carry those gigantic trees than gargantuan individuals?
Yeah, whether they're hybrid giants or true giants. They're still
we're just super strong. Yeah. Okay, awesome. So then, Geshurites. Did we hit Geshurites?
No, but I think there's another one that you mentioned in there before the Geshurites. But doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
We'll get to them all anyways. Geshurite is not listed in the Table of Nations.
Okay.
None of these giant nations are.
Okay.
And the Geshurim are giants. And they have two areas where they live. One partially in the Mount Hermon region, and then another region that's down with the Amalekites and Malachim, but towards the Egyptian border.
Okay.
So when David is warring, after he's sent away by the
Okay, Shawnee, good night, mate.
he goes and his city where he's living is attacked. He's going to go attack the Amalekites that weren't part of the war by the border, and the Geshurites and the Girgashites.
Okay.
That were all grouped together. So that would be the Gershim.
Okay.
Which, if you got Girgashites listed, that's the Gershim.
Yeah.
And again, they're not in the Table of Nations.
Interesting. Wow. So gosh, I think we're almost. Actually, I think we are about halfway through the list that I've got over here. We've covered a lot of ground.
There's more to name and eliminate.
We're gonna get there. I just want to read off a couple of comments here that we've gotten. And again, thank you so much, Gary, for taking your time to chat with us tonight, because I am learning as much as I'm sure everybody else is here.
Yep.
I've all but given up trying to take full notes over here, because it's such an amount of information. I'm probably going to watch this back in halftime. That way I can get everything done. Let's see here. We have from Howard Kent Gregg. Which tribe was considered the most violent, and what was the reason
Great
behind
question.
such brutality?
Great question.
That's a good question in terms of who would be the most violent. I mean, certainly the Philistine Confederacy had a huge reputation, and Israel did not even take them on when they first came out, and then they marched around to avoid them. And then they were the nemesis for over 400 years until David finally subdued them. So I would think, and they had this amalgamation confederacy of all of these other giants that they brought with them from Crete, plus the ones that were related to them in the southern in the southern region, and they were part of what I call a larger Southern Alliance after they expropriated the land. And so there was a Southern Alliance there before, but it was now they're going to become the dominant part. But you have the Horim and the Malachim and the Amalekites and the Horites that are all part of this Southern Alliance. The Southern Alliance goes right back to the War of Giants. And you can understand the campaign by understanding there's a Southern Alliance, a Central Alliance, a Northern Alliance, and an Eastern Alliance. And you can understand the campaigns better that way of the Exodus Wars.
Sure.
So I would put the Philistines as being that most powerful. I would say the most vicious were the Mesopotamian descendants that eventually formed the Assyrian Beast Empire. And they would flay people. They would absolutely tear their body parts off, chop them all up. They would skin people, and they would impale people, as Vlad the Impaler did. Nineveh was the city of blood. Of course, Nineveh is the city of Nimrod, and between his intermarriage and the Eastern Giants, is you get the formation of Nineveh and the Assyrians and the Beast Empire. And of course, all the Beast Empires are bloodlines of these powerful kings of the Rephaim bloodlines. So Egypt, they're created through giants, and you've got like the Zuzim of Ham, which people wonder, why are they trying to combine Zuzim and Zamzuzim? Zamzuzim were in the Mount Hermon region. It looks like through some archaeology there was a little bit of Zuzim further south, but the Zuzim are of Ham. That's Africa. Right? So that's where they were located. And then you have other giants like the Perazim and other things. There's intermarriage that's going to form the Pharaoh dynasties, but that's the first one. Sirius, the second Beast Empire. Right? And then you have Babylon, that the third dynasty is kind of, part of, and then you have the Persians, which is again part of that the third dynasty, as well as the Beast Empire. And then you have the Greek bloodlines of the giants is the next one, and then the Romans from the gens Julia and Romulus and Remus, Nephilim and Rephaim from two Greek gods as they produce that. So you have all of these Beast Empires that are interacting all with Israel, from the birth of Israel into a nation where they were in Egypt, and then Egypt tried to wipe them from the face of the earth as they escaped to Assyria. They invaded. They were trying to wipe Israel from the face of the earth. They were stopped because the southern kingdom repented, but the northern kingdom was destroyed and dispersed. And the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar is listed as the terrible of nations. He is one of the most terrible of the ones. He's going to take Judah into exile. The Persian king, and then at the time of the Persian kings, you have a descendant of Agag among the Agagite.
Oh my gosh! Now, who is Darius in that whole mix?
Well, he's part of the Achaemenid kings and the Persian Aryan bloodline. Wow. They even admit it. I write that about in the second book and cite the examples out of history. So
I need it. I need it.
Right, but one thing the Persian king with Cyrus does is he permits, as with the Medes, is that they permit the temple to be rebuilt, and Judah gets to go back, but they're still part of the whole experience of Israel and Judah. In this case, what's left of only the southern kingdom. And then the Greek Empire comes in and invades and completely takes over the Judean Empire, and they start to install and support a Edomite kingship, with the Romans are going to officially install. And then you have the Romans, that's the Herodian kingship that I'm talking about, that's Edomite. And then you have the Romans who are going to invade Israel as well. And then they're going to destroy Jerusalem, destroy the temple, and send them in the diaspora. Those are all six are beast empires that are trying to wipe Israel from the face of the earth completely. And the only time that we see more beast empires are in the end time. And what are they trying to do? They're going to try and wipe Israel from the face of the earth again, along with Christians grafted into that covenant.
My gosh, thank God the 144,000 are sealed.
The eighth empire, so.
Gosh. Yeah, again, to reiterate, thank God the 144,000.
Vast, that link about China, the whole world is under judgment. There's fires everywhere. There's floods everywhere. There's pestilence everywhere. There's famine starting to be everywhere in the West. It's getting really hectic. I reckon we're deep into the time of sorrows. We can't be that far off full-on tribulation. We can't be like, we're not 5 years away from trib. We're closer than that.
Are sealed to not have to endure the worst of that. Wow. Yeah. Well, excellent. Soundly handled there. Another question here. We've got, let's see. Do we think the Nephilim descendants are still in today's world?
Their descendants are. They call themselves the Royals. And people need to look at where that word comes from. So typically Ra, ROI or ROY, comes through Old French. It's king, and it's regal back into Latin. And AL is a transliteration of EL. EL is the word small case for an angel or a god. They're the kings of God.
Everything's
Royale.
a counterfeit.
And people say, well, yeah, you just substitute that transliteration in. No, not really. Let's look at Baal.
Sure.
AL. In the different languages, you can have EL that will show up as ILU in the East. AL, also ALLAH, that's more of a feminine format, but you have several different transliterations of that same suffix that's used to denote a god of the pantheon.
Wow.
So yeah, these are the Rex Deus, as they also like to call themselves.
Wow.
And there's, as I said, I mentioned one of the main gens of the gene of Isis, or I mentioned the Julia gens. If I didn't name it by name, that's the Romulus and Remus bloodlines of the Roman royal families that Caesar and Augustus come from, the Italian black nobility, in large part, not all, because there's a Middle East influence in some of that black nobility. Then you have also the Albi gens, this is another one, which a lot of the more northern Europeans take their bloodlines from. But they all track those bloodlines back to their patriarchal Nephilim, Rephaim, and God. Wow. And they all received the divine right to rule from the Council of the Gods on Mount Hermon.
Wow. Do some digging, guys. Acts 17:11 always applies to any of the streams that I do, and that encourages you to not take anything that Gary and I are saying here as the God's honest truth, but you are empowered to do your own digging into the subject. You will be enriched for the toil, and you will learn a thing or two.
So,
wow.
So, did I answer that question?
Yes. Very, very thoroughly.
Are they around? Yeah. So, and look at King Charles III, for example. He says he has his genealogies that go back to Vlad the Impaler, right? And he has genealogies that will take him back further. So, who's Vlad the Impaler? Well, he was, character that Dracula was based on, and his imagery is the imagery of Vlad the Impaler. And Dracula means son of a dragon, son of Seraphim, heavenly dragon, right? He was a red-haired, pale-skinned, hazel-eyed, descendant, the tribe of Anu, the Datanu, same color hair as the Hori, which were part of that whole Tuatha De Danann, larger sort of name for the nomenclature of tribes there, and that he took his genealogies back to the Agrathi tribe of.
Vast. I'd go as far as to say the Israelis are the smartest of the lot. I think they're the smartest people on the planet. The way they do Mossad and all that sort of stuff. They're very clandestine. They're very intelligent.
Greece and northern Turkey, which was descended from a son of Hercules, son of Zeus.
Wow. So now this will probably answer the question immediately following the one that was just asked, and it was, have I missed the part where the original vampires come from?
Well, the vampires is based on, a lot of history, but and a few different sources. So like there's female vampires and there's male vampires and there's some different kinds. But the vampire mythos as we understand it today is really based on Dracula, right? And as a serpentine dragon, son of a dragon, Dracula means, that the Seraphim were the ones who created the original Nephilim, and then most of the giants again after the flood, as being watchers. And we get watchers that does show up in the Bible. It shows up in Daniel 4 times, and it goes back to the Hebrew word ayir, which means watcher, and it is the last part of the compound word sa'ir, S-A with an apostrophe, which means first part is shaggy, hairy, and goat, watcher. A degraded satyr is a degraded watcher.
Wow. Right.
It's like a Pan god. It's like a Bacchus god. It's like a Cern god or Cernunnos god. All the different, the Faunus god. There's Inus. There's so many of these ones that show up after the flood. Not all of them immediately went to the abyss, but we know they were very sexually deviant. And why they disappeared? Because they're in the abyss.
Wow. Okay, so here's another question for you then, just of my own. With the angels who did sexually sin with man and then go into the abyss, did they get to just live out their life until they, in their mortal form, died and then they were sent to the abyss? Or was that like a, hey, you copulated, now you're pulled out, you're now in the abyss?
Yeah, well, I think what happens before the flood is that they're allowed to continue until the flood happens, right? So when in Genesis 6:4, they went to, the daughters of men, the sons of God. And we know sons of God are angels for a lot of reasons. We'll just talk about Job 38:4-7. The sons of God were there at creation with the morning stars, another order, stars, angels, host of heaven. Sons of God are used interchangeably as the same kinds of beings, but there's different ranks and orders. That's the only thing you have to keep in mind on that. So in Genesis 6:4, they did it again. Now, I understand that to be probably again after the first 200, as the book of Enoch refers to, that there was originally 200. We don't get that biblically, but seems reasonable that that might have been the case.
Sure.
Whether or not, there was giants that created, but then again, several times maybe up to the time of the flood.
Okay.
There was so many more giants, but after the flood as well is how I would interpret it. That it's kind of open-ended.
Yeah.
So you don't have to restrict it to just before the flood. You don't have to restrict it to again only after the flood. It's just again over and over.
Would you think it's reasonable to?
But answer your question, after the flood, the gods only walk amongst humans for a short period of time. So after Baal and Ashtaroth and all the other gods like Zeus and around the earth, they're probably similar gods. Once they produce those giants, they kind of disappear. And so I think they get hauled off rather quickly, just as all of the fallen angels who did the crimes before the flood were all lined up at one time at the time of the flood and taken into the abyss. And then we get into this worship of the demigods as representative of the gods. But remember, they are the disembodied spirits of the giants, that they're a counterfeit spirit that's not permitted to sleep. Human spirits sleep until our resurrection or rapture for some fortunate people that will be raptured. But they weren't permitted to sleep and they weren't permitted to heaven. So there's something called in Greek history hero worship. A hero is a Nephilim or a Rephaim. They were the local tyrants, the local tyrannus, the local Gyges of Greek mythology, descendants of Hercules. They're what is it? I'm not going to get it. Herculides, as the bloodline of Hercules goes. And when they died, they were very upset because they either committed suicide or the body was rotting away or somebody killed them and they weren't able to repair themselves, so they lost their heads. And if they weren't permitted to find their way to the other world, or weren't automatically as one of the terrible ones sent to the sides of the abyss, they would come back and haunt their local people.
That's where we get the demons from.
Yeah. And so you do get these devil gods that aren't satyrs, that are these shades that are talked about in the Old Testament. So there's two different kinds of gods that they're worshiping, and that these are the demigod spirits that they're worshiping, and they're known in Taoism as the vagabond ghost demons that would come back and haunt them. They would put talismans up and things like that. So
sure. And
people think that the ghosts that they see are their ancestors. No. That's demon spirits. They are the offspring, the disembodied spirits of the giants that aren't in Sheol and aren't in the abyss prison. They're the ones that are to wander. These are the ones that Jesus ran up against,
Mm-hmm.
like Legion.
Yep.
And where it says you see them defined as evil spirits, you see them defined as unclean spirits, and you also see them defined in Jesus' accounts as devils, and that's a very bad translation.
Yeah.
That's the
agreed.
Hebrew word, that's the Greek word daemon for demon.
Hmm.
Wow.
And they're all used interchangeably in those accounts. So the same type of being, and it's not diablos that is used to translate the devil as in Satan. It's a different word in every application. When it is devil for Satan, it's going to be diablos. When it's a demonic spirit, it's daemon. And so we know that there are these disembodied spirits that are haunting and possessing humankind and causing all sorts of grief for humans.
So my health insurance went up.
Join the club.
And my home loan and energy bills.
Join
Compare Club. Our experts find you the right deals with ease.
Fantastic. So I think it's important for anybody out there who's sort of unfamiliar with what Gary was just talking about. The Nephilim, because they are damned offspring, they're made ineligible for resurrection. So like you said, they're cursed to be shades. They're cursed to be these disembodied spirits. When a Nephilim dies, their spirit is stuck here, and that's where we do get our demons. As such, they are seeking embodiment because that's the only way that they get a chance to taste life again. But correct me if I'm wrong, because they're spoken of only being able to wander through dry places, waterless places. They're sort of condemned to that. But correct me if I'm wrong here. The reason why they tend to attack their host so much, like throwing them into fire and convulsing them, is because their spirits are incompatible with our just regular human framework.
Well, there's a war going on. It's not a symbiotic relationship. You're
trying to force themselves in and push us out,
suppressing the host. So if it gets that bad, it'll kill the host and then leave and try and find another one. I mean, it is pure evil, right?
Yeah, and what better way to lull a person into a false sense of security than showing up as your grandma or your grandpa and pretending as though they're here to guide you on some great journey in life. No, they're trying to get you to lower your guard so that you invite them in and they push you down to a corner inside your own psyche and then wreak havoc with your body.
Now, get this. This is how well they brainwashed the whole world with this thing that, these are, everybody has these spirits and
your familiars.
Yeah. Here's another example of how well they brainwash us, because they control the complete nobility class, all of the arts all throughout. So when you go to the old theaters, they have makeup on or they have masks on. And that's to either hide or represent the spirit that they are channeling. And so it's the same mask that's used in China, only they actually get more accurate with those theater masks, that they're very demonic looking.
Those Yoshimitsu looking dudes with the teeth like this and like that.
Oh, yeah. And all sorts of painted things. And you see all these really weird statues of these things all throughout Asia. It's the same imagery as the shaman with that pale white face and what they do with the Day of the Dead celebration.
Sure.
Right?
Like
it's the same idea with the crazy clown aspect with the demonic trickster spirit that they're trying to channel through them. It's the same as the Joker, right? In a deck of cards, which is the Joker, the jester in the royal court, that is to hide a polytheist priest in the court who advises, but he's there in this role so that people don't recognize him, and he doesn't do what the king wants or doesn't make the right prophecy or the right potion or whatever he's there to do. They took a knife to them and they slit him up like this. Now, roll that forward to Batman and the Joker. That's the exact imagery. And Batman is a superhero based on ancient giants. And I talked about the Zabalba and the bird-faced giants in the Popol Vuh. And in the Popol Vuh, They have a branch of the Zibelba, which is the Camazots.
Oh my gosh.
House of Fat. And if you Google Camazots, you get this imagery of Fat Man's outfit.
Oh my gosh.
How is that
Oh.
word? Connect. It just, and that's the way they run it. Everything is like that.
Wow, Mike.
And it's funny, but it's horrific when you.
Yeah, like
Yoda is based on a demon from Manly P. Hall's book on Freemasonry. Yoda's exactly looking like a demon from that.
it's so dressed up, and they know full well exactly what they're doing. Like, this is not some big joke to them. Like, it's very serious to them, but we're made to go and enjoy the flowery colors, or we're made to enjoy the intense action, but that theme that runs through there.
Yep.
My gosh. I was just digesting that for a second here.
Yeah, that was
wow. I can tell you were having fun there. Well, I'm gonna got a super chat here, and then we're gonna get back to our list here. Thank you for indulging our questions there, Gary. There's another one comes from Thomas Furman. Thank you again for the super chat, Tom. It says, Mr. Wayne, what is your favorite book you haven't written? Also, do you have a good biblical joke? Hopefully not about Balaam.
No, I don't have a good biblical joke. I don't think it's wise to joke about the Bible. Or the Word of God. I just try not to. No? So I'll pass on that one. What's my favorite book? Boy, I don't know. I've read so many books. I mean, other than the Bible. I mean, oh boy, yeah, no, I'd have to think about that. It just. I was a voracious reader, so
sure, we'll come back to that one there.
Yeah.
Wow. So anyway, I think we left off with the Gibeonites and Gibeonim. Next up, I've got the Gibalites or the Giblites.
Yeah, I've not made any connections to them that they are a separate race. They might be. Gibelitis is a city associated with Petra and the Amalekim, but they seem to be a city of the Amalekim, and so I think that the Gibelites would be just Amalekim that lived in the same city, because again, understand that Petra was the royal city of the original Amalekim, and they set up in a Pentapolis-like city, and typically the Gibelites were associated with the Petra people as well. So in more of the ancient side, right? So yeah.
So then they'd be classified more than as hybrids then of the Amalekim?
No, I think it's like the Anakim being called Gittites.
Oh, it's a great book, Charles Dickens' Tale of Two Cities. It's a brilliant book.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Then will we classify them?
Another classic, Gone with the Wind. I've read that twice.
And then as giants then?
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. Just marking these off. Next up, we have the Girgashites or the Gershim.
Yes. And the Ben Gurg.
Wait, Ben Gurg, are we, like, you're saying like Ben Hur?
Nope, Ben Gurg, G-R-G, in the Ugaritic text.
Okay.
So the Girgashites are a Canaanite hybrid race, part of the families.
Oh, man.
And the patriarch is probably Gurg. That's listed in the Ugaritic text, sons of Gurg.
Okay. Gurg, what a name. A lot of G's in some of their names.
Yeah, it's got some connections, and I won't go through it right now, but there's a lot of connections back into Mesopotamia with Gurg and the people there too. So
very good. Okay. Next up, we have the Gittites, Philistine.
Gittites? Yeah, from Gath.
Awesome. All right. We already touched on the Hivites already. Yep. Would they be rendered as giants or hybrids?
As an ite, a hybrid.
Okay. Is that sort of like rule of thumb if it's
Hivim, Hivim, Hivite.
Gotcha.
Hivim, giant, Hivites, some of the offspring, and you get accounts of both. So you have to be careful in terms of location and who they are and what they're doing. So Hivites were generally Canaanites that interbred with the Hivim. The Hivites, like Hamor and others there are several Hivim kings would rule over them, in terms of a different sort of city or location. But
got you. Okay, that clears up one of my discrepancies that I had inside my own research here. Thank you for that. And I know I mixed up Hivites with Hittites. Give us a rundown of them.
Hittites are sons of Heth.
Okay.
Right? And Heth and Sidon and Canaan are the ones who provided the daughters to the Rephaim to create those 9 tribes.
Now, are we talking Canaan, Ham's son?
Yeah.
Wow.
And one presumes that Canaan and Heth and Sidon produced hybrids as well, but married daughters of giants because they're named as the patriarchs for the Hittites, for the Canaanites, and for the Sidonites.
Got you. Okay.
Just as Timnah and Eliphaz. Timnah was a Horim, Eliphaz was son of Esau to create the Amalekites, and is listed in a different sort of genealogy accounting in Genesis 36 with the Dukes.
Got you. So then, when we see Canaanites, I know Canaanites is sort of an all-encompassing term for those tribes residing in Canaan,
Yep.
but is it also a classification for a specific tribe within them? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and so the Sodomite Pentapoles in the giant war that we were talking about would have Rephaim kings over actual Canaanites. But you are right that Canaanites is a generic term for all of the tribes, just as Amorites is sometimes thought to be a generic term in the application for all of the Canaanites as well. So let's just talk.
Yeah, the French Revolution in France, in Paris, and normal business in London, Tale of Two Cities.
About some of the names.
Brilliant
of
book.
Kings of
Brilliant
Sodom.
movie.
Yeah, give them to us.
So Bira means son of evil. Shinab, splendor of the father, or the shining of the father, because they were the shining ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Shemeber, lofty, just as fallen angels and kings were the lofty ones.
Sure.
Of lofty from Mount Hermon. Bela, to swallow up or destroy, from Baal and Bel.
Sure.
Yeah. And I think the last one is Shemeber, but I can't remember what that one means.
No worries.
Yeah.
Gosh, they really seem to
oh no! Did I mention Bersha? That was probably the one, and that means wickedness and iniquity. So all of the names were describing terrible ones.
Yeah, it really seems like name begets the form with these guys.
Yeah.
Wow. Let's see. We're closing it. We got about 17 minutes left. We're sort of closing in on the end of it. Let's see if we can squeeze a couple more inside here. So let's see. Did we touch on Horim already?
Yes.
Okay, got them already.
Giants. Yep.
Now I've got Hurim, Turim. You covered that for me here. We got the Jebusites. Let's get into them.
Yes, they are a patriarchless Canaanite nation.
Okay.
And so generally it's thought that Jebus was the patriarch for them.
Okay, Jebus. So we're talking giants then here?
Hybrid giants.
Hybrids. All right. If anybody had a bingo card, you'd probably have blackout right now. Let's see here. The Cadmonites.
Cadmonites, yes, the people of the East, the QDM, as are recorded in the Ugaritic texts, original ancient vowelless Semitic and Hebrew. And they are the Cadmonim, and they are the people of the East. and part of the giants of the east when we talked about the Mesopotamian giants.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Part of the mighty 10.
okay, that's you pulled the thought straight out of my head there. I was just going to ask if they were sort of part of that confederacy.
Yeah, so the Hebrew word is kadmoni. Put the male plural on, put the I-am, kadmonim. And it also means oriental, but generally from the east and east of the east of the Euphrates River for the most part. So
Interesting. Let's see here. We've got next up, we have the Kenites.
yes, so again, and the Kadmonim don't have a patriarch. The Kenites don't have a patriarch, and the Kenazim. So it's the Kenim, the Kadmonim, and the Kenazim. I call them the ancient KKK. So once you know that, you won't be too surprised that all of the imagery of the KKK as they're known today, which are National Socialists and Aryan belief system, they have serpents, cyclops, giants, realms, all occult language in there. It's just another left-wing polytheist initiated organization. So you've got the Kenite, the Kenim. It comes from Kayan or Cain, meaning smith, and rooted in Cain, as in Cain before the flood. But I think it's more of an eponymously. They named themselves after that, or you can believe that giants made from the Cainite line survived the flood. That's another option. I tend to think that they just accepted that name. They're listed in the Ugaritic texts as the QNI as part of the Rephaim tribes, so we know the Rephaim. And as I said, no patriarch. And the Kenazim is Hebrew Kenazi or Kenaz, and it also means Eastern people as well. So again, part of that same children of the East in the Judges' War, all sort of sources the word for that amalgamation or that alliance with the Amalekites and the Midianites after the flood. They were bolstered by those Eastern giant nations. After the Exodus,
Far out.
Yeah.
Brief question here actually comes from Ken Ami. Did God seek to be rid of the Nephilim via the flood?
God is Alpha Omega. He knows the beginning from the end. He knew angels would rebel. He knew Adam and Eve would fall. He knew the giants would be created by the fallen angels before the flood. He knew they would redo it again after the flood, or they would find a way to save them. He allows everything to play out through free choice, so that all the names that are written in the book of life before creation have a chance to not have their names blotted out through free choice. The Adamites were created as the resolution for the angelic rebellion, and that's why we wind it up with most of the detail.
Oh, so they rebelled first before Adam and Eve fell, obviously.
In the end time. And at that time, we start to be resurrected to be like angels and to also judge those angels for their crimes against humanity and against the earth. And then you have another 1,000 years to wrap up the final details and a testimony that we're no better than angels, because those who survive into the millennium at the end, they will rebel as well.
Man. Well done there.
But then we go off to eternity, and God has told us everything from the beginning to the end. So,
man, what a time to be alive. Let's see here. We got about 12 minutes left. Oh, can we make it? Can we make it?
We'll try.
We're lightning round here. All right, we got the Kenazites.
Covered them.
Oh, we gotta get them. Shoot, Kenazim. Okay, I need to type that in here. While I'm typing that, the Maccathites.
Yes, giants.
Awesome.
And Makkah is one of those patronymic names for kings and for queens. Just as David marries Makkah from the Gerzites of Mount Hermon.
Oh my gosh! Oh,
produces Absalom, who tries to take over.
Yeah, and gets
the kingship and usurp the bloodline and the Messiah.
Yeah, he gets real abusive there too.
Yeah.
My God.
So the Maccathim are giants. Yes.
Wow. Okay. Then we have Nephilim already covered as a general. Some people list them as a separate tribe, but it's just a general sort of
It's a general name for them, and the ones before the flood is how you would understand that.
The parasites.
Perazim, part of the mighty seven, the mighty 10. Yes, giants.
Oh, the parasites. We call parasites leeches and things like that, but there's an actual giant tribe called parasites. Wow.
Excellent.
No picture of it.
We already covered that the Philistines were an entire confederacy, not exactly like was it, I guess was there ever
Specifically, hybrids were the Philistines who lived amongst the giants, who helped produce the hybrids that they became, right?
Okay, so then would that be just like sort of like with Canaanites, their own separate tribal name?
Yes.
Okay, cool, awesome.
And they're known by a lot of different names. I put them all in the new book. There's just several different names for them, all similarly pronounced, but
that is wicked helpful because my spelling is atrocious. Just so you're aware. Okay, just a few more here. We've got the well, obviously we have the Rephaim as sort of an all-encompassing term.
Yep.
Was
and,
it ever
and a tribe as well.
Okay? Pulled the thought out of my head again. We're on the same wavelength here, Gary. You touched on the Sidonians briefly. Are they part of the Philistines?
No. They were part of the hybrids that made up Tyre and the Phoenicians. And Sidon City was part of the capitalist city. So the kings were like King Hiram and kings like that all have a Rephaim bloodline and recorded in the execution texts as being demigods and things like that. So anyways, yeah.
Was Sidon, that wasn't a coastal city, was that?
Yeah, close to a coastal city.
Okay. Very good. This one, here's a layup for you. We got the Zamzumim.
They are giants, and they are different from the Zuzim, as I think we talked about earlier, related. So they lived alongside the Emim, just a little bit away, so across the Jordan River. And I think I can't quite remember if that is just north of the Emim or just south of the Emim, but outside the Og and Sihon Empire of that period. That would have been the Rephaim territory immediately around parts of Mount Hermon, just as you have the Gergeshim, and the Makathim, and a couple other nations around Mount Hermon as well. So, but anyways, they were related to the Zuzim, but distinct. Okay.
Gotcha. And we've already tackled the Zuzim, so we did it. We knocked every single one off of my list here. So my final question is, are there any others that I didn't have over here? Did I miss any of the bingo squares?
Well, yeah, you have the Cherathim.
Okay.
The Pelathim from the Philistine Confederacy. You need to put that in because they're part of those giants that came from Cyprus and Crete, I mean. So, did we miss any? Let me think. I think you did a pretty good job on that, and I thought we'd have some more weeded out that were duplications in terms.
Okay, Kelly. Good night.
Wow.
But on the top of my head, I'm not thinking of it. None are coming to my mind. I have to get the whole list in front of me. But
sure, yeah. Suffice to say, I'll send you what I have over here, and if any notes in the margins would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah.
Well, wow, we finished with 7 minutes to spare. My goodness, this has been a lot of fun, and I thank you again, Gary, for helping us set the record straight here and get down to.
Did you get the Captarine?
Yes, I got the Captarines over here.
Okay.
Part of the Philistines.
Yes, but a separate group.
Okay.
I've got some notes here on some things, so I'm just seeing whether or not there's anything that might pop up out of that. That's not a complete list, but I don't think we've missed any. I think that's most of them. So if I come across any other ones, I'll shoot you an email.
Outstanding. We have one final super chat here, which I'm actually going to answer this one. Thomas Furman says, does God knowing what you will do preclude the existence of true free will? And the answer to that is no. We have a fantastic story with David while he's being pursued by King Saul. This is when he's on the run and Saul wants him dead. I can't remember the name of the city that he goes to, but he inquires of God. He says, hey, if I stay here, will Saul come and take my life? Or if I go, essentially, will I be free? Will I be okay? And God says, yeah, if you stay, he's going to come for you and he's going to put all you guys to ground. God knows two things there that haven't happened yet, but potentially can happen. It didn't preclude David's ability to have free will and make his choice, because God knows two things that can and will happen given what David decides to do.
Yeah. And it doesn't preclude that God may not intercede at times to ensure all the names that were written in the book of life have the opportunity to come and choose to keep it there or have it blotted out. So, you know, the creation of the nation of Israel is an intercession.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Jeez, I just started, I just finished Deuteronomy today for the third or fourth time, throwing them in the book of Joshua, and hearing Moses recount all the goings on, all the pitfalls, all the things that God has done for them. It's like, wow, what an exercise in patience the Lord endures every day.
And what was so interesting about that Alpha, Omega, and free choice is in the Holy Covenant that they're provided, and they're given so many chances. But the thing that he did provide them as well is you can have the future play out through the blessings of the covenant or the curses of the covenant. But if you choose to hold up the covenant, we would have had a whole different result in terms of the history that we went through. But you know, the end result would be similar, would just be played out differently without all of the violence, and probably maybe even shorter. But God knew that they would not hold up the covenant, and so the covenant is being fulfilled through the curses. And so they've had the diasporas. They will be remembered again. They will be brought back into the covenant in the end time, just as the covenant lays out, called by name, as the book of Isaiah talks about. And there will be an exodus, and Jesus will lead them in that exodus, and they will accept Jesus as the Messiah in the last 3.5 years. And if you want to get a better understanding of this exodus and a resurrection and something that's different than happens with the church, you need to read Ezekiel 37, the dry bones. That is the resurrection of Israel in the last 3.5 years, in the time of Jacob's trouble. And the breaker comes to break them out of the prisons in the year of the Lord's favor. And then after they're being raised back up, all of Israel passed and Judah passed. They're going to go up and be judged. And then you read about second Exodus, that Jesus will be leading, as Micah 5 and Micah 2 talk about, that Jehovah will be at their lead, their Lord will be at the lead in that Exodus when he brings awakened Israel. The 144,000 apart are there to wake up. And visible Judah, who are in prisons all around the world, leads them back to the wilderness where the people of Judea have fled. And he brings them back into the covenant in time for the supper of the Lamb, for the Armageddon battle, which is the last year of the last 3.5 years. So last year before, is the year of the Lord's favor.
Wow. What a time that will be to see. My goodness. See, 10:58. Looks like we have time for one more question snuck in here at the very end. Again from Thomas Furman. Gary, are you a post-wrath, rapture, or a millennialist?
Well, I look at that in a couple of different ways. I am in my wishful heart pre-trib rapture. I am in my research just after mid-trib.
Yeah, I'm just after mid-trib. Pre-trib, we get out of it too easy.
And I know everybody gets through scripture, but the only way you take the contradictions out is to let all of the passages come together.
Yeah.
Or you have to start ignoring inconvenient
Sure.
passages with a preconceived conclusion.
Sure.
I mean, as people talked about, I first read the late great, and he wrote many books, and he was a mid-trib fan. I part company on hell on that, just because I don't believe the Bible has any contradictions, and I don't think prophecy has any contradictions. And the way you get rid of those contradictions is to
Back it up
put
with other
everything around
scripture.
what Jesus said in prophecy, and everything else in the Bible you can around what Jesus said, and not vice versa. The prophets, disciples, do not define what Jesus said.
Mm-hmm.
What the prophet said is defined by what Jesus said.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you put everything around that, all the contradictions go away.
Amen. Well, we have hit the 11 o'clock mark. If you're on Eastern Standard Time, we're at 10 o'clock Central Standard Time. Gary, thank you so much for joining me in this discussion tonight. This has been a ton of fun. I feel like I don't know if I'll sleep tonight for the next few hours. I'm probably just going to lay awake, just trying to reconnect all the lines here. I would commission you, sir, to draw us up a family tree. If you could, that would be fantastic to be able to see all these connections where they stem from, specifically for the Nephilim and the Rephaim tribes and who their progenitors were. Is there anything that you'd like to plug?
Good night, Di.
No, just that I'll have my new book will be out sometime this year. We're just, as I said, we're working through it. It's going to be called the Genesis 6 Conspiracy Part 2, and it's called the subtitle. It's called How Understanding Prehistory and Giants Helps Define End Time Prophecy. So it goes through all the giants, angelic order, all the terms you need to help define end time prophecy. Because you have to understand the whole context of the Bible. And if people are looking to come see me, if you're in the Atlanta area on a May 26th weekend, there's a Sacred Word.
Okay, guys, I've got one more, goes for half an hour, and then I'm going to hang up. Visions of the Tribulation, 3 visions of the Tribulation. It only come out a couple of hours ago.
If you go to your right, you'll see a statue of the perfect man. And to your left, the city's ugliest tree.
There's a chemist's own for that.
If it's pain relief you need, there's a chemist's own for that.
Nearly 7 years. Can you believe that? Well, we talked. We said many years ago, I think now it's probably been nearly 7 years. Can you believe that? Well, we talked about a very specific vision given to a man named Ken Peters. And we analyzed that vision, whether it was biblical, and we could see that they were just lining up with scripture. Well, that vision was given to Ken in 1980. And if my calculations are correct, there is now another vision that was received 34 years later.
By Ken?
By a different person, unrelated to Ken. And he just goes by the name Brandon. I'd like to give him credit, and I'd like to know his last name, but he doesn't say it. So Brandon has had a vision in 2014 about the pre-trib and the tribulation. And I just want to compare them. And I think I counted at least half a dozen things, major events, that are just the same. So 2 people separated by 34 years, given visions by Jesus, in line with the word, and at least 6 things, 6 major upcoming events are exactly the same, but told from a different angle in a different way. So it's my job to then, as a pastor, as a teacher, to bring some biblical grounding to it, to analyze the theology of it, and to put scriptures to some of these things that they're talking about. Because when they talk about it, they're just kind of telling anecdotes. But we want to make sure that everything is grounded well in the Bible. The Lord said in Matthew 24, verse 21, For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. That's a scary thing, because a lot of bad things have happened in this world. And Jesus said, something is coming up that can't be compared to anything in the past or anything else in the future. That's
Love this
called,
guy.
in biblical language, the Great Tribulation. It spans about 7 years. It's marked out by a specific event at the midpoint called the abomination of desolation. And that, you, in simple term, in layman's term, that's when you know who the Antichrist is. That's when even people who don't follow the Bible, don't read the Bible, will say, there's a world leader on stage, and he thinks he's God. He thinks he's divine. And whatever it is, something's going to convince masses of people. And tonight, we have new information. So not only do we have a lot of the same material in these two visions, now we have new revelation, which is very normal, because we always say the Bible is progressive and also revelation is progressive. As you grow up, you know more. Well, if you grow up spiritually, wouldn't you know more?
Yep.
Exactly. That's called spiritual growth. So we're going to learn more things that I don't think most of us have ever heard before. So it's becoming, the picture of the future is becoming more and more coming into focus, becoming clearer. Whether you believe it or not, it's up to you, because all you have to do is wait and see. But sometimes when you wait and see, like wait and see and write a will, or wait and see and get life insurance or health insurance, sometimes it's too late. So it's just not wise. It's in fact, the Lord's telling me, that's just foolish. We need to call things as they are. That's a foolish thing. So Ken Peters saw his vision in 1980. Brandon saw it in 2014. So in this vision of Brandon, he said the first thing he saw when the vision started was a lady screaming, "They're gone! They're gone!" And he said, "Who's gone?" And she said, "The aliens came and got them. The aliens took the Christians. They disappeared. They went up." Now remember, Ken Peters was not born again yet at the time he received the revelation. He did not know the Bible, didn't study, wasn't influenced by some 19th century, 20th century Pentecostal theology. He just was told by Jesus. That's how it starts.
Wow.
He said the cities were in flames. Looters were trashing the cities globally. Now here's the new part. That part is the same. The new part is, he said, what happens at that moment is peace leaves the earth. And he said, you never know this. You just take this for granted. But he says, every morning when you wake up, even if you're the worst sinner on earth, you wake up relatively.
We saw this. We seen this guy's vision. I remember that. You wake up and you wake up with a certain amount of peace, but apparently it'll be like waking up with no peace.
Refreshed. There is a sense of comfort and peace that you wake up to. And he said, that's the presence of the church.
Wow.
That's the atmosphere of prayer that covers the earth every morning when people wake up. Even if you don't pray, millions of Christians have been praying. And that changes the atmosphere of this planet. He says, when you take the Christians out, it's gone. And people wake up and there's no peace. There's no comfort. So it really begins to make people panic. They're really stressed. They're really fearful. And there is no peace left. There is a void of peace that used to blanket the earth. Now, we know that the Holy Spirit is not going to leave the earth because he's still going to be working. There are people going to get saved during the tribulation, right? So you need the Holy Spirit to convict people of sin. So who is it that leaves the earth and takes the peace with him? The Bible says in John 14, verse 27, Jesus said to us, "Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give to you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid." So what happens when we leave and the peace is gone? The world is troubled and the world is in total fear. What is holding back all the evil from coming out blatantly in your face? The presence of the church. You know that. They know that. They know the church is a hindrance to their wicked programs to sexualize kids and indoctrinate young people and turn everybody into financial slaves. Who's holding it back? The church. And really, they can't do anything until the church is taken out of the way.
They say, know your limitations.
They say, are you sure you're up to this?
And sure.
So he's standing with Jesus. He said Jesus was at his right hand the whole time. Jesus didn't say much, but was taking him through the vision. At this point, he and Jesus were translated up to Europe. And here's a new bit of information. The world leaders, the moment the rapture happens, all the world leaders gather at a round table in Berlin. And I've been saying that. I said, Germany was on the wrong side in World War I. They're on the wrong side in World War II. Guess what? History repeats itself. History is prophecy. It seems like they're going to be on the wrong side in World War III. And that's what the vision confirms. World leaders were asking this man for help. They did not know what to do. And to them, he had all the wisdom. Now, this is going to shock a lot of the prophecy teachers and students again, but I believe this is a confirmation of what we've taught for many years about the identity of the Antichrist. He described the Antichrist and he said he was Middle Eastern. How many people keep looking over to Europe? You don't understand. You don't understand the vision of Daniel's vision of the empires. It doesn't just end at Rome. That's why it doesn't end at Rome, because there's something else coming. And the greatest enemy of the Jews have always been fanatical Muslims. Why is that so hard to understand? But yet people still are teaching about how it's going to be a European descent Antichrist. Daniel chapter 8, verse 25.
No, he was telling Ken Peters' vision. Ken Peters went outside and someone was yelling, they've taken the Christians. The aliens are taking the Christians. So he was just repeating what she said. And don't forget, he wasn't Christian at the time, so he wasn't aware that the fallen angels were really ETs.
Through his policy, also, he shall cause deceit to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart. And the King James says, and by peace shall destroy many. The 21st century updated language says, and by using peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, and he shall be broken without raising a hand. Remember when Jesus comes on a white horse in Revelation 19, he will simply speak the word, and the Antichrist and his false prophet will be thrown into the lake of fire.
Amen.
Without hand. Even God can't put up with him. A big mouth blasphemer. The third thing, if I'm counting correctly, that is the same about the two visions is the way the persecution starts. The man and his underlings will begin to announce that if you see a Bible anywhere, it is mandated by law that you bring Bibles into common areas. There'll be areas like courthouses, football stadiums, anything that's public. They will stack them up. He says he saw millions of Bibles stacked up. Then they said, if you bring the Bible, write your name down. They will record that you brought the Bible. They also want you to have an opportunity. If you did not bring the Bible, you can come and you can check out the Bibles. You just have to write your name down. Yeah. And he said all of this was a trick, because this was now the beginning of their surveillance state. They wanted to know the names of everybody connected to the Bible. He said within a couple of months of the rapture, he saw a football field with Bibles 3 to 4 stories high, and all of them were burned by the order of him, the Antichrist. He said there were massive amounts of smoke. So there goes, the whole climate change agenda. They don't care about burning smokes when they're flying in their private jets. That's okay. But if you so much as turn on a stove, if you use gasoline, right? They say, oh no, you're killing the planet. You don't care about the planet. But for them, they'll be burning Bibles. They'll send all that carbon monoxide and dioxide up. Another new thing is he will put flags on the courthouses. Remember that I've been, I think, the first, but I don't mind if I'm the second or third. But as far as we know, I was the first to say the 4 horses represent the colors on Islamic State flags, right? White,
Yep, that's where I learned it from. This guy right here. Check this out.
black, white, red, black, and green. White, red, black, and green. And I had this video that went viral. I just kept showing those colors on flag after flag after flag. Well, it turns out I wasn't speaking symbolically. This is literal. He said, the Antichrist will put flags up at courthouses and public places, and the colors are black, green, and white.
Wow.
I don't know why he didn't say red, but he says what he saw was black, green, and white. And on, I guess, some of them, he saw golden swords at the center. So that tells you clearly, I mean, there's a flag of Saudi Arabia that's exactly that. It's white, green, with a sword right at the center. He said any sovereign flag was removed. Well, do you know that in Australia this week, for the first time, I saw some sports game, and they didn't raise the Australian flag. They raised the Aboriginal voice flag. And the social media comments were, where's the Australian flag? You see, they want to start conditioning us to cede our sovereignty. The sovereignty is racist. Being nationalist is racist. Being patriotic is racist. That's what they're beginning to condition us. This all plays into the tribulation scenario. Sovereign flags are removed. He said, as far as he understood, each color represented an Islamic terror group. Now, he didn't go on to explain, but I can explain it. Green is the color long associated with Islam. Black and white, I mean, even without knowing very much, if you ever see masses and masses of Muslim people gather together, you will see all the men wear white, all the women wear black hijabs. Always. Basically, the Antichrist was thanking all of the terror groups for helping to bring his reign in. And he acknowledged them by the colors of the flag. And that's there, right there in Revelation chapter 6. We've been talking about it for many years. I think at least 7 years. All right, number 4, similarity. There were massive screens all over town squares, all over the world. They build these massive screens for people to see. But what is it that they want to see? The new addition is he's projecting worship. He's getting everybody. Imagine all these atheists, people who didn't go to church in Australia, and they think they're atheists. You know what? They will fall down and worship a false god very quickly. And here's the new bit of information. Every Friday, you're required to worship him. Well, what religion is associated with Friday?
Islam.
Sunday is associated with Christians, rightly or wrongly. I think it is right, because the resurrection and the day of Pentecost is on Sunday, right?
That's
Sunday,
a good take.
Associated with Christianity. Saturday, the Sabbath, associated with Judaism. Friday is traditionally associated with Islam. And every Friday, this world leader demands that you bow down and worship. Everyone was required to wear white garments on their heads and white robes on their bodies. And people will comply. They will be in single file lines. Every line will be neat and perfect. And all the people will be required to get on their knees and to bow down and worship. Number 5 similarity is, and again, some of you will get angry at this, but it's better to hear it now. If this is right, you better hear it now. Many Christians will be left here on earth. That's exactly what both people saw. And I think we have some scriptural grounding. I wish all Christians go. Okay? If I get to decide, I say, hey, Pastor Steve said we can all go, but I am not the decider. I'm not the one. And when I look at the Bible, I do see some troubling passages in scripture that indicate not all Christians go. Here they are. Here are some of them. Luke chapter 21, verse 36, the words of Jesus our Lord. Watch ye therefore and pray always, that ye may be accounted worthy to escape all these things that shall come to pass, and to stand before the Son of Man. Let's read that in reverse. You are not watching and you're not praying always, therefore you're not accounted worthy to escape. You will be part of all these troubles that will come on the earth. Right? So what
Wow, that's us safe then.
What is a definition? I don't know, the definition of being accounted worthy, because I believe the blood of Jesus makes us worthy. We're all worthy to be saved and go to heaven. Yes. But to be worthy to escape these things that come on the earth is a different issue, because he's referring specifically to a time period that is the most talked about time period in the Bible. And he says, watch. So if you're not even paying attention to prophecy, how could you be watching? And then 2, pray always. I don't know any human being that can pray 12 hours a day. I mean, I know some very dedicated people who are praying 6 hours a day. That's possible. Then you have to take a break. You got to eat. You got to do other things. But what is the limit? What is the definition? What is the threshold of praying always? I would say that you have to pray every day at some point. You've got to be on your knee and say, hallelujah, praise the Lord. I worship God, not the devil. You got to say that at some point. And say, thank God, this is the day the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. What would you like me to do? I am your servant. This is not my day. This is not my program. This is your kingdom. And you saved me. I could be in hell. You saved me. What would you like me to do? At some point in the day, you need to be engaged in prayer. I'm not going to count the minutes. I don't know the amount of minutes you need to clock in so you can say, okay, I am praying always. But if you don't pray even daily, you don't qualify. I can say that. So that's why I say in online church, we pray daily in Australian time, 7 to 8. Americans join us, Europeans join us. We're happy to start another prayer group. But why start another prayer group until you've at least come to this one, and we can start other prayer groups in other time zones? Sure. But if we say, okay, 7 to 8, we're praying, I can at least say, Lord, I think I qualify. I'm watching prophecy to be fulfilled, and I'm praying always. Right? You want to pray more? Please pray more. But to pray less, possibly you won't qualify. And that's a heavy price to pay. Like praying a little bit every day, an hour is not a lot. An hour goes by like this. That's a small price to pay to miss 7 years of hell on earth. Well, they will cut your head off. And I'm going to tell you this very soon. And I'm going to tell you the conditions. Let me give you some other scriptures. One is not enough. I understand that. Matthew chapter 25. Again, Jesus speaking. He says in verse 10, and while they went to buy, these are the 5 foolish virgins. What happens to them? The bridegroom came, and they that were ready went in with him to the marriage, and the door was shut. That doesn't sound good. Afterward came also the other virgins, saying, Lord, Lord, open to us. And he answered and said, verily I say unto you, I know you not. Watch therefore, for ye know not, for ye know.
That'd be the Sabbath fast. I saw something yesterday on the Sabbath and the days of the Sabbath, and they said Jesus is the Sabbath. So it's not a day anymore. It's actually Jesus is the Sabbath.
Neither the day nor the hour wherein the Son of Man cometh. Okay, so all 10 are saved, right? Maybe you're called a virgin, especially in these days. You're a virgin. You're pure. You're good. You're saved. Spiritual. If you're a spiritual virgin, you're saved. And half of the saved people stayed here on earth while the Antichrist tortured them. Why? Because they weren't ready. Now, here's the thing. Were they getting ready? Probably. Yes, they were.
Yeah.
Yes, they were. They woke up. They said, you know what? It's good to go to church. I think I'll go. It's good to serve God. I think I'll start. It's good to pray in tongues. I think I'm going to ask God for the infilling of the Holy Spirit. But the timing of when they ask and when they begin and when they serve was too late.
He played his first drive. Cue the...
Censored by Big Tech. Ministry partners can download our app now at discoverchurch.online. That's discoverchurch.online.
There's a lot of Christians now living just like the world. And Brandon says they will be left here. At the rapture, they will find themselves stuck here. He mentions pastors who preach a watered down grace message or a lukewarm gospel. They were also left here. He said that the Christians who were left here were furious. They were mad, and they started going after the preachers and told the preachers, "You lied to us. You didn't tell us the truth." Jesus then specifically says for Brandon to look at this, watch this, and remember this. And he was shown preachers on TV, and he named TBN. Preachers and personalities on TBN were left behind.
No surprise there.
Said, watch this. And the Christians were ready to kill them. Now, I've been on TV a lot. I don't know if I'll ever get on TBN. I've had no connection. But I wonder, I'd like to know, would you like to hear this message on TBN? In preaching prophecy for more than 20 years, we've got revelation and we've got encouragement. Doesn't this need to be told the body of Christ? Are we just going to celebrate grace only and live by grace and do nothing till Jesus comes? We need to get busy. The devil's minions are busy. The devil's children are busy. We ought to be busier with the power of the resurrection inside of us, with the grace and the faith that's inside of us. Thank you for the one yes in this church. Hallelujah. You're going up, okay? I'm gonna put a good word in for you. Listen to this. One lady from church. He recognized a lady from church. He didn't say whether he goes to this church anymore, but he said he saw one lady from church, looked up to heaven, and gave the Lord the middle finger. And then she gave the Lord some, explicit words. He said he saw many Christians will turn on God. They will be so mad that they didn't get to go. Some who knew what was coming but didn't live right for God began to form groups. They said to themselves, we have to go to the mountains and find places of safety. They dug holes in the sides of the mountains and they were trying to keep warm. Because the mark of the beast had come into effect, Christians could not buy and sell anymore without the mark. Christians were trying to move around at night. He noticed that in particular farmers had guns, but not a lot of Christians had guns. Another thing that's the same is you will be given, if you're left here, you will be given an ultimatum. He said he saw a very specific family, a Christian family that was left behind. They had children during the tribulation. They had two of them, a boy and a girl. So these children were aged only, he said, around 3 to 4. I would say that would be about right, even if you go to the midpoint of the tribulation, you're only going to have a 4-year-old child. So there's a family, and they got this boy and girl. And the authorities came and gave them the ultimatum and said, we're going to give the children chips first. So they want to chip everybody. So it is a chip. The mark of the beast is confirmed to be a chip.
Wow.
What does it do? I'm going to explain more. And they said, if you don't deny your Jesus, we're going to cut your children's heads off. Now, what are you going to do in that situation?
Deny? No, you're going to...
The dad said, no, we're not taking the mark. We will die.
That's what you'd say, exactly.
And so the man from the authority had a huge sickle. Again, the sickle is another symbol of, all the other swords. Roman swords are straight, but the curved sword is Arabic, Islamic. They had a sickle, and they put it to the neck of the baby. He said, in this time during the tribulation, there is no mercy left on the earth. Nobody has mercy. Nobody has a conscience. And the dad said, no, you must not cut the baby's head off. And when he said that, they cut his head off. He said there was no time, no waiting at all. He said the head rolled down with the blood gushing out to his feet in his vision. He said he could smell the blood.
Wow.
At this point, the wife said, I'll take the mark. And the children are crying because they saw their father beheaded. The wife is bawling because she saw her husband had just died. And then the authorities give them the chip. And he said, here's the thing. Here's the new thing. The moment they take the chip, instantly they stop crying. They had no emotions left. The chip gave them peace. So there's more to this chip than just barcodes and buying and selling. There's something biological now about this chip. It made them cold, turn cold in their face, and they look calm. And they didn't cry about him anymore. It's almost like they didn't care anymore. They didn't care about their father. They didn't care about their husband. He said he saw another man during the tribulation trying to commit suicide, and he had the mark. And the chip sent a signal to his brain and calmed him down, and he didn't end up killing himself. Somehow the chip almost knew what you're about to do. So here's something new. These things are all old. We've heard this before. We've read the Bible. We know this. But here's the new thing. I'm going to explain, because people have visions and they don't themselves always understand what they're seeing. What this tells me conclusively is that there's the white horse and the black horse are working together. The white horse represents medical tyranny. The black horse represents financial slavery. So the chip was always taught by everybody from, the well-renowned Chuck Missler to your latest prophecy favorite teacher, has always been taught that the chip is to control buying and selling. What I'm going to add to the explanation today, so that you are forewarned, is that the chip has something to do with the pharmaceutical industry. The chip is not just for financial slavery. It's financial slavery, medical tyranny, and spiritual blasphemy. It will also take away if you want to be saved, you can't be saved, the Bible says. You cannot take this chip and be saved. That tells me, I've always wondered, how could it just be a financial mark? That doesn't make sense. How can just not buying and selling, or if I took, a credit card, people thought at first it was a credit card, then people thought RFID chips. How could the act of engaging in the economy make me lose my salvation? And obviously it isn't. It is a medical thing. So the step is, step one, seed your financial freedom. Step two, seed your biological medical freedom. Step three is you're going to seed your salvation. You're going to let go of any opportunity to ever be saved for eternity. The chip covers all three. So it has to produce a zombie-like effect. There's a movie, actually, The Giver. So it produced lack of emotion, lack of any sexual attraction. So all of this was controlled by the chip in this movie. You know what? Hollywood often sees the future. It's uncanny, but it happens a lot. So this chip is much more than just financial, but it has to be combined. The white horse has to work together with the black horse and work together with the Antichrist. The chip seems to know what you're about to do. He saw people mowing their lawns, but their bodies were there, but he says it's like they're not there. They were like robots. They were like zombies. And the chip did something to their brains, to their willpower. Jesus then took Brandon to a place with gray barricades. Okay, so you've seen these gray barricades all over the place, any highway, you've seen those. So that's what they were. He saw one lady with a bruise or a burn. He said some people's bodies had a physical reaction to the chip. So some people had burn sores on their heads and on their hands. Not everybody's body can accept this chip. So this one lady, she was trying to recreate the burn sore with makeup. And she was standing in line and she was basically faking it. She's trying to show that she has the chip and she's got this reaction to it. The people were desperate for food. They were trying to get into these towns for resources inside there. And basically they saw that she was faking it. So as soon as she got to the line, they just cut her head off. He said there was no delay, no wait, no explanation, no mercy. They just cut her head off. He said her head rolled down the line and nobody had any reaction. People had absolutely no emotion about a woman's head being cut off. He said the chip was very small. It didn't need a battery, which is now a hint of what we know is something they work on, which is called nanotechnology.
Which you were just talking about, Bas?
Chip.
You're just talking about that.
Automated single-touch payroll. You can take your business to a new realm. Wait.
I'll conclude with James chapter 5, which promises exactly this. Verse 1 says, "Go to now, ye rich men, weep and howl for your miseries that shall come upon you. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten." That means ain't going to do you much good if you keep all your riches without serving God. Verse 3, "Your gold and your silver is cankered," or corroded. Gold and silver don't corrode. That means it tells me, in my opinion, gold and silver drop in value. Maybe Bitcoin goes up.
I don't know what's going on with the camera.
I don't have another explanation for this, because cankered, it doesn't happen. Gold does not rust. It's not a physical part of your gold. Your gold and silver are cankered, and the rust of them shall be a witness against you, and shall eat your flesh as it were fire. You have heaped treasure together for the last days. What's their sin? They heaped up, they amassed, they had all these savings that they never used.
Let the camera refocus.
And he says, I'm going to call that money out. I'm going to call. For who? The Bible says, "Behold, the hire of the laborers." Are you a laborer for Jesus? We are called laborers, right? If you preach the gospel, if you preach the word, you're called a laborer. "Behold, the hire of the laborers who have reaped down your fields, which is of you kept back by fraud, crieth. And the cries of them which have reaped are entered into the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth," or the Lord of hosts, the Lord of heaven's military might.